You want blow it, and it would have worked for them. Another nod. Blood and ashes. You mean me to blow it for you. When the last battle comes, you mean me to call heroes back from the grave to fight the Dark One for you. Blood and bloody ashes. She put an elbow on the arm of the chair and propped her chin on her hand. Her eyes never left him. Would you prefer the alternative? He frowned, then remembered what the alternative was. If someone else had to sound the horn. You want me to blow the horn? Then I'll blow the horn. I never said I would not, did I? The Amelin gave an exasperated sigh. You remind me of my Uncle Juan. No one could ever pin him down. He liked to gamble, too, and he'd much rather have fun than work. He died pulling children out of a burning house. He wouldn't stop going back as long as there was one left inside. Are you like him, Matt? Will you be there when the flames are high? He could not meet her eyes. He studied his fingers as they plucked irritably at his blanket. I'm no hero. I do what I have to do, but I am no hero. Most of those we call heroes only did what they had to do. I suppose it will have to be enough for now. You must not speak to anyone but me of the horn, my son, or of your link to it. For now, he thought. It's all you're bloody going to get, now or ever. I don't mean to bloody tell every... She arched an eyebrow, and he made his voice smooth again. I do not want to tell anyone. I wish nobody knew. Why do you want to keep it such a secret? Don't you trust your Aes Sedai? For a long moment, he thought he had gone too far. Her face hardened, and her look could have carved axe handles. If I could make it so that only you and I knew, she said coldly, I would. The more people know a thing, the more the knowledge spreads, even with the best will. Most of the world believes the Horn of Elir is only legend, and those who know better believe one of the hunters has yet to find it. But Shale Ghul knows it has been found, and that means at least some dark friends know. But they do not know where it is, and if the light shines on us, they do not know you sounded it. Do you really want dark friends coming after you? Half men or other shadow spawn? They want the horn. You must know that. It will work as well for the shadow as for the light. But if it is to work for them, they must take you or kill you. Do you want to risk that? Matt wished he had another blanket and maybe a goose-down comforter. The room suddenly felt very cold. Are you telling me dark friends could come after me here? I thought the White Tower could keep dark friends out. He remembered what Celine had said about the Black Adja and wondered what the Amelin would say to that. A good reason to stay, wouldn't you say? She got to her feet, smoothing her skirts. Rest, my son. Soon you will feel much better. Rest. She closed the door softly behind her. For a long time, Matt lay staring up at the ceiling. He barely noticed when a serving woman came with his piece of pie and another pitcher of milk, taking the tray of empty dishes when she went. His stomach rumbled loudly at the warm smell of apples and spices, but he paid that no mind either. The Amelin thought she held him like a sheep in a pen. And Celine? Who in the light is she? What does she want? Celine had been right about some things, but the Amelin had told him she meant to use him, and how. In a way. There were too many holes in what she had said to suit him, too many holes she could slip something deadly through. The Amelin wanted something, and Celine wanted something, and he was the rope they were tugging between them. He thought he would rather face Trollocs than be caught between those two. There had to be a way out of Tar Valon, a way out of both their grasps. Once he was beyond the river, he could keep out of Aes Sedai hands and Celine's, and dark friends too. He was sure of it. There had to be a way. All he had to do was think about it from every angle. The pie grew cold on the table.
Chapter 21. A World of Dreams. Egwene scrubbed her hands with a hand towel as she hurried down the dimly lit corridor. She had washed them twice, but they still felt greasy. She had not thought there could be so many pots in the world, and today had been bake day, so buckets of ashes had to be hauled from the ovens, and the hearths cleaned, and the tables rubbed bone white with fine sand, and the floors scrubbed on hands and knees. Ash and grease stained her white dress. Her back ached, and she wanted to be in her bed, but Verin had come to the kitchens, supposedly for a meal to eat in her rooms, and whispered a summons to her in passing. Verin had her quarters above the library, in corridors used only by a few other Brown sisters. There was a dusty air to the halls there, as if the women who lived along them were too busy with other things to bother having the servants clean very often, and the passages took odd turns and twists, sometimes dipping or rising unexpectedly. The tapestries were few, their colorful weavings dulled, apparently cleaned as seldom as everything else here. Many of the lamps were unlit, plunging much of the hall into gloom. Egwene thought she had it to herself, except for a flash of white ahead, perhaps a novice or a servant scurrying about some task. Her shoes, clicking on bare black and white floor tiles, made echoes. It was not a comfortable place for one thinking of the Black Aja. She found what Verin had told her to look for, a dark paneled door at the top of a rise, beside a dusty tapestry of a king on horseback receiving the surrender of another king. Verin had named the pair of them, men dead hundreds of years before Arthur Hawkwing was born. Verin always seemed to know such things, but Egwene could not remember their names or the long-vanished countries they had ruled. It was the only wall hanging she had seen that matched Verin's description, though. Minus the sound of her own footsteps, the hallway seemed even emptier than before, and more threatening. She rapped on the door and entered hurriedly on the heels of an absent-minded, "Who is it? Come in." One step into the room, she stopped and stared. Shelves lined the walls, except for one door that must lead to inner rooms and except for where maps hung, often in layers, and what seemed to be charts of the night sky. She recognized the names of some constellations, the Plowman and the Hay Wain, the Archer and the Five Sisters, but others were unfamiliar. Books and papers and scrolls covered nearly every flat surface, with all sorts of odd things interspersed among the piles, and sometimes on top of them. Strange shapes of glass or metal, spheres and tubes interlinked, and circles held inside circles, stood among bones and skulls of every shape and description. What appeared to be a stuffed brown owl, not much bigger than Egwene's hand, stood on what seemed to be a bleached white lizard's skull, but could not be, for the skull was longer than her arm and had crooked teeth as big as her fingers. Candlesticks had been stuck about in a haphazard fashion, giving good light here and shadows there, although seeming in danger of setting fire to papers in some places. The owl blinked at her, and she jumped. "Ah, yes," Verin said. She was seated behind a table as cluttered as everything else in the room, a torn page held carefully in her hands. "It is you, yes." She noticed Egwene's sideways glance at the owl and said absently, "He keeps down mice. They chew paper." Her gesture took in the entire room and reminded her of the page she held. Fascinating, this. Roselle of Essam claimed more than 100 pages survived the breaking, and she should have known, since she wrote barely 200 years afterwards, but only this one piece still exists, so far as I know. Perhaps only this very copy. Roselle wrote that it held secrets the world could not face, and she would not speak of them plainly. I have read this page 1,000 times, trying to decipher what she meant.
Excuse me.
The tiny owl blinked at Egwene again. She tried not to look at it. "What does it say, Verin?" said I. Verin blinked, very much as the owl had. "What does it say? It is a direct translation, mind, and reads almost like a bard reciting in high chant. Listen. Heart of the Dark, Baalzamon. Name hidden within name, shrouded by name. Secret buried within secret, cloaked by secret. Betrayer of hope. Ishamael betrays all hope. Truth burns and sears. Hope fails before truth. A lie is our shield. Who can stand against the heart of the dark? Who can face the betrayer of hope? Soul of shadow, soul of the shadow, he is... She stopped with a sigh. It ends there. What do you make of it? I don't know, Egwene said. I do not like it. Well, why should you, child? Like it or understand it? I have studied it nearly 40 years, and I do neither. Varen carefully placed the page inside a silk-lined folder of stiff leather, then casually stuffed the folder into a stack of papers. But you did not come for that. She rummaged across the table, muttering to herself, several times barely catching a pile of books or manuscripts before it toppled. Finally, she came up with a handful of pages covered in a thin, spidery hand and tied with nubby string. Here, child. Everything that is known about Liandrin and the women who went with her. Names, ages, ajas, where they were born. Everything I could find in the records. Even how they performed in their studies. What we know of the ter'angreal they took, too, which isn't much. Only descriptions for the most part. I do not know whether any of this will help. I saw nothing of any use in this. Perhaps one of us will see something. A sudden wave of suspicion took Egwene by surprise. If she didn't leave something out. The Amerlin seemed to trust Varen only because she had to. What if Varen was Black Aja herself? She gave herself a shake. She had traveled all the way from Tomon Head to Tar Valon with Varen, and she refused to believe this plump scholar could be a dark friend. I trust you, Varen Sedai. Can I really? The Ayes Sedai blinked at her again, then dismissed whatever thought had come to her with a shake of her head. That list I gave you may be important, or it may be so much waste of paper, but it isn't the only reason I summoned you. She started moving things on the table, making some shaky stacks taller to clear a space. I understand from Anaya that you might become a dreamer. The last was Corianin Nadir, 473 years ago, and from what I can make of the records, she barely deserved the name. It would be quite interesting if you do. She tested me, Varen Sedai, but she couldn't be sure that any of my dreams foretold the future. That is only part of what a dreamer does, child. Perhaps the least part. Anaya believes in bringing girls along too slowly, in my opinion. Look here. With one finger, Varen drew a number of parallel lines across the area she had cleared, lines clear and dust atop the old beeswax. Let these represent worlds that might exist if different choices had been made, if major turning points in the pattern had gone another way. The worlds reached by the portal stones, Egwene said, to show she had listened to Varen's lectures on the journey from Tomon Head. What could this possibly have to do with whether or not she was a dreamer? Very good. But the pattern may be even more complex than that, child. The wheel weaves our lives to make the pattern of an age, but the ages themselves are woven into the age lace, the great pattern. Who can know if this is even the 10th part of the weaving, though? Some in the Age of Legends apparently believe that there were still other worlds, even harder to reach than the worlds of the portal stones, if that can be believed, lying like this. She drew more lines, cross-hatching the first set. For a moment she stared at them. The warp and the woof of the weave. Perhaps the wheel of time weaves a still greater pattern from worlds. Straightening, she dusted her hands. Well, that is neither here nor there. In all of these worlds, whatever their other variations, a few things are constant. One is that the Dark One is imprisoned in all of them. In spite of herself, Egwene stepped closer to peer at the lines Varen had drawn. In all of them? How can that be? Are you saying there is a father of lies for each world? What if so many Dark Ones mix together? No, child. There is one creator who exists everywhere at once in all of these worlds. In the same way, there is only one Dark One who also exists in all of these worlds at once. If he is freed from the prison the Creator made in one world, he is freed on all. So long as he is kept prisoner in one, he remains imprisoned on all. That does not seem to make sense, Egwene protested. Paradox, child. The Dark One is the embodiment of paradox and chaos. the destroyer of reason and logic, the breaker of balance, the unmaker of order. The owl suddenly took flight on silent wings, landing atop a large white skull on a shelf behind the Aes Sedai. It peered down at the two women, blinking.
Excuse me.
Egwene had noticed the skull when she came in, with its curled horns and snout, and vaguely wondered what sort of ram had so big a head. Now she took in the roundness of it, the high forehead. Not a ram's skull, a Trolloc. She drew a shuddering breath. Varen Sedai, what does this have to do with being a dreamer? The Dark One is bound in Shale Ghul, and I do not want to even think of him escaping. But the seals on his prison are weakening. Even novices know that now. Do with being a dreamer? Why, nothing, child, except that we must all confront the Dark One in one way or another. He is prisoned now, but the pattern did not bring Randall Thor into the world for no purpose. The Dragon Reborn will face the Lord of the Grave, that much is sure. If Rand survives that long, of course. The Dark One will try to distort the pattern if he can. Well, we have gone rather far afield, haven't we? Forgive me, Varen Sedai, but if this, Egwene indicated the lines drawn in the dust, has nothing to do with being a dreamer, why are you telling me about it? Varen stared at her as if she were deliberately being dense. Nothing? Of course it has something to do with it, child. The point is that there is a third constant besides the Creator and the Dark One. There is a world that lies within each of these others, inside all of them at the same time, or perhaps surrounding them. Writers in the Age of Legends called it Telaran Riod, the unseen world. Perhaps the world of legends is a better translation. Many people, ordinary folk who could not think of channeling, sometimes glimpse Telaran Riod in their dreams, and even catch glimmers of these other worlds through it. Think of some of the peculiar things you have seen in your dreams. But a dreamer, child, a true dreamer, can enter Telaran Riod. Egwene tried to swallow, but a lump in her throat stopped her. Enter it? I don't think I am a dreamer, Varen Sedai. Anaya Sedai's tests, Varen cut her off, prove nothing one way or the other. And Anaya still believes that you may very well be one. I suppose I will learn whether I am or not eventually, Egwene mumbled. Like, I want to be, don't I? I want to learn. I want it all. You have no time to wait, child. The Amyrlin has entrusted a great task to you and Nynaeve. You must reach out for any tool you might be able to use. Varen dug a red wooden box from under the welter on her table. The box was large enough to hold sheets of paper, but when the Aes Sedai opened the lid a crack, all she pulled out was a ring carved from stone, all flecks and stripes of blue and brown and red, and too large to be a finger ring. Here, child. Egwene shifted the papers to take it, and her eyes widened in surprise. The ring certainly looked like stone, but it felt harder than steel and heavier than lead, and the circle of it was twisted. If she ran a finger along one edge, it would go around twice, inside as well as out. It only had one edge. She moved her finger along that edge twice, just to convince herself. Coriana Nedil, Varen said, had that ter'angreal in her possession for most of her life. You will keep it now. Egwene almost dropped the ring. A ter'angreal? I am to keep a ter'angreal? Varen seemed not to notice her shock. According to her, it eases the passage to Telaran Riod. She claimed it would work for those without talent as well as for Aes Sedai, so long as you are touching it when you sleep. There are dangers, of course. Telaran Riod is not like other dreams. What happens there is real. You are actually there, instead of just glimpsing it. She pushed back the sleeve of her dress, revealing a faded scar the length of her forearm. I tried it myself once, some years ago. Anaya's healing did not work as well as it should have. Remember that. The Aes Sedai let her sleeve cover the scar again. I will be careful, Varen Sedai. Real? My dreams are bad enough as they are. I want no dreams that leave scars. I'll put it in a sack and stick it in a dark corner and leave it there. I'll... But she wanted to learn. She wanted to be Aes Sedai, and no Aes Sedai had been a dreamer in nearly 500 years. I'll be very careful. She slipped the ring into her pouch and tugged the drawstrings tight, then picked up the papers Varen had given her. Remember to keep it hidden, child. No novice or even an accepted should have a thing like that in her possession, but it may prove useful to you. Keep it hidden. Yes, Varen Sedai. Remembering Varen's scar, she almost wished another Aes Sedai would come along and take it from her right then. Good child. Now off with you. It grows late, and you must be up early to help with breakfast. Sleep well. Varen sat looking at the door for a long time after it closed behind Egwene. The owl hooted softly behind her. Pulling the red box to her, she opened the lid all the way and frowned at what nearly filled the space. Page upon page, covered with a precise hand, the black ink barely faded after nearly 500 years. Corianin Nadil's notes, everything she had learned in 50 years of studying that peculiar ter'angreal. A secretive woman, Corianin. She had kept by far the greater part of her knowledge from everyone, trusting it only to these pages. Only chance and a habit of rummaging through old papers in the library had led Varen to them. As far as she could discover, no Aes Sedai besides herself knew of the ter'angreal. Corianin had managed to erase its existence from the records. Once again she considered burning the manuscript, just as she had considered giving it to Egwene. But destroying knowledge, any knowledge, was anathema to her. As for the other, no. It is best by far to leave things as they are. What will happen, will happen. She let the lid drop shut. Now where did I put that page? Frowning, she began to search the stacks of books and papers for the leather folder. Egwene was already out of her mind. Chapter 22. The Price of the Ring. Egwene had only gone a short distance from Varen's rooms when Shiriam met her. The mistress of novices wore a preoccupied frown. If someone hadn't remembered Varen speaking to you, I might not have found you. The Aes Sedai sounded mildly irritated. Come along, child. You are holding everything up. What are those papers? Egwene clutched them a little tighter. She tried to make her voice both meek and respectful. Varen Sedai thinks I should study them, Aes Sedai. What would she do if Shiriam asked to see them? What excuse could she give for refusing? What explanation for pages telling all about 13 women of the Black Aja and the ter'angreal they had stolen? But Shiriam seemed to have dismissed the papers from her mind as soon as she asked. Never mind that. You are wanted, and everyone is waiting. She took Egwene's arm and forced her to walk faster. Wanted, Shiriam Sedai? Waiting for what? Shiriam shook her head with exasperation. Did you forget that you are to be raised to the accepted? When you come to my study tomorrow, you will be wearing the ring, though I doubt it will soothe you very much. Egwene tried to stop short, but the Aes Sedai hurried her on, taking a narrow set of stairs that curled down through the library walls. Tonight? Already? But I'm half asleep, Aes Sedai, and dirty, and I thought I would have days yet, to get ready, to prepare. The hour waits on no woman, Shiriam said. The wheel weaves as the wheel wills, when the wheel wills. Besides, how would you prepare? You already know the things you must, more than your friend Nynaeve did. She pushed Egwene through a tiny door at the foot of the stairs and hurried her across another hall to a ramp curving down and down. I listened to the lectures, Egwene protested, and I remember them, but can't I have a night's sleep first? The winding ramp seemed to have no end. The Amerlin seat decided there was no point in waiting. Shiriam gave Egwene a sidelong smile. Her exact words were, once you decide to gut a fish, there's no use waiting till it rots. Elaine has already been through the arches by this time, and the Amerlin means you to go through tonight as well. Not that I can see the point of such a hurry, she added, half to herself. But when the Amerlin commands, we obey. Egwene let herself be pulled down the ramp in silence, a knot forming in her belly. Nynaeve had been far from forthcoming about what had happened when she was raised to the accepted. She would not speak of it at all, except for a grimaced, "I hate Aes Sedai." Egwene was trembling by the time the ramp finally ended at a broad hallway, far below the tower in the rock of the island. The hall was plain and undecorated, the pale rock through which it had been hewn smoothed but left otherwise untouched, and there was only one set of dark wooden doors, as tall and wide as fortress gates, and as plain, although of smoothly finished and finely fitted planks at the very end. Those great doors were so well balanced, though, that Shiriam easily pushed one open, and pulled Egwene through after her into a great domed chamber. "Not before time," Elida snapped. She stood to one side in her red-fringed shawl beside a table on which sat 3 large silver chalices. Lamps on tall stands illumined the chamber, and what sat centered under the dome. 3 rounded silver arches, just tall enough to walk under, sitting on a thick silver ring with their ends touching where they joined it. An Aes Sedai sat cross-legged on the bare rock before each of the spots where arches joined ring, all 3 wearing their shawls. Alana was the sister of the green Aja, but she did not know the yellow sister or the white. Surrounded by the glow of Saidar embraced, the 3 Aes Sedai stared fixedly at the arches, and within the silver structure an answering glow flickered and grew. That structure was a ter'angreal, and whatever it had been made for in the Age of Legends, now novices passed through it to become accepted. Inside it, Egwene would have to face her fears 3 times. The white light within the arches no longer flickered. It stayed within them as if confined, but it filled the space, made it opaque. "Be easy, Elida," Shiriam said calmly. "We will be done soon." She turned to Egwene. "Novices are given 3 chances at this. You may refuse twice to enter, but at the 3rd refusal you are sent away from the tower forever. That is how it is done usually, and you certainly have the right to refuse, but I do not think the Amerlin seat will be pleased with you if you do." She should not be given this chance. There was iron in Elida's voice, and her face was scarcely softer. "I do not care what her potential is. She should be put out of the tower, or failing that, set to scrubbing floors for the next 10 years. Shiriam gave the Red Sister a sharp look. "You were not so adamant about Elaine. You demanded to be part of this, Elida, perhaps because of Elaine, and you will do your part for this girl as well as you are supposed to, or you will leave and I will find another." The 2 Aes Sedai stared at one another until Egwene would not have been surprised to see the glow of the One Power surround them. Finally, Elida gave a toss to her head and sniffed loudly. "If it must be done, let us do it. Give the miserable girl her chance to refuse and be done with it. It is late." "I won't refuse." Egwene's voice quavered, but she steadied it and held her head high. "I want to go on." "Good," Shiriam said. "Good. Now I will tell you 2 things no woman hears until she stands where you do. Once you begin, you must go on to the end. Refuse at any point, and you will be put out of the tower just as if you had refused to begin for the 3rd time. Second, to seek, to strive, is to know danger." She sounded as if she had said this many times. There was a light of sympathy in her eyes, but her face was almost as stern as Elida's. The sympathy frightened Egwene more than the sternness. Some women have entered and never come out. When the ter'angreal was allowed to grow quiet, they were not there, and they were never seen again. If you will survive, you must be steadfast. Falter, fail, and... Shiriam's face drove the unspoken words home. Egwene shivered. "This is your last chance. Refuse now, and it counts only as the first. You may still try twice more. If you accept now, there is no turning back. It is no shame to refuse. I could not do it my first time. Choose." "They never came out?" Egwene swallowed hard. "I want to be Aes Sedai, and first I have to become accepted." "I accept." Shiriam nodded. Then ready yourself. Egwene blinked, then remembered. She had to enter unclothed. She bent to set down the tied bundle of papers Varen had given her, and hesitated. If she left them there, Shiriam or Elida, either one, could go through them while she was inside the ter'angreal. They could find that smaller ter'angreal in her pouch. If she refused to go on, she could hide them away, perhaps leave them with Nynaeve. Her breath caught. I cannot refuse now. I've already begun. Have you already chosen to refuse, child? Shiriam asked, frowning. Knowing what that will mean now? No, Aes Sedai, Egwene said quickly. Hastily, she undressed and folded her clothes, then set them on top of the pouch and the papers. It would have to do. Beside the ter'angreal, Alana suddenly spoke. There is some sort of resonance. She never took her eyes from the arches. An echo, almost. I do not know from where. Is there a problem? Shiriam asked sharply. She sounded surprised, too. I will not send a woman in there if there is any problem. Egwene looked yearningly at her piled clothes. Please, yes, light a problem. Something that will let me hide those papers without refusing to enter. No, Alana said. It is like having a bite-me buzz around your head when you're trying to think, but it does not interfere. I would not have mentioned it, only it has never happened before that I ever heard. She shook her head. It is gone now. Perhaps, Elida said dryly. Others thought such a small thing was not worth mentioning. Let us go on. Shiriam's tone would not put up with any more distractions. Come. With a last glance at her clothes and the hidden papers, Egwene followed her toward the arches. The stone felt like ice under her bare feet. Whom do you bring with you, sister? Elida intoned. Continuing her measured pace, Shiriam replied, One who comes as a candidate for acceptance, sister. The three Aes Sedai around the ter'angreal did not move. Is she ready? She is ready to leave behind what she was, and passing through her fears gain acceptance. Does she know her fears? She has never faced them, but now is willing. Then let her face what she fears. Even in its formality, there was a note of satisfaction in Elida's voice. The first time, Shiriam said, is for what was. The way back will come but once. Be steadfast. Egwene took a deep breath and stepped forward, through the arch and into the glow. Light swallowed her whole. Jine Daughtry dropped by. There's odd news down from Baerlon with the peddler. Egwene raised her head from the cradle she was rocking. Rand was standing in the doorway. For an instant her head spun. She looked from Rand, my husband, to the child in the cradle, my daughter, and back again in wonder. The way back will come but once. Be steadfast. It was not her own thought, but a disembodied voice that could have been inside her head or out, male or female, yet emotionless and unknowable. Somehow it did not seem strange to her. The moment of wonder passed, and the only thing to wonder about was why she had thought anything seemed out of round. Of course Rand was her husband, her handsome, loving husband, and Joya was her daughter, the most beautiful, sweetest little girl in the 2 rivers. Tam, Rand's father, was out with the sheep, supposedly so Rand could work on the barn, but really so he could have more time to play with Joya. This afternoon, Egwene's mother and father would come out from the village, and probably Nynaeve, to see if motherhood was interfering with Egwene's studies to replace Nynaeve as wisdom one day. What kind of news? She asked. She took up rocking the cradle again, and Rand came over to grin down at the tiny child wrapped in swaddling clothes. Egwene laughed softly to herself. He was so taken with his daughter that he did not hear what people said to him. Rand? What kind of news? Rand? What? His grin faded. Strange news. War. There's some big war taking up most of the world, so Jine claims. That was strange news. Word of wars seldom reached the two rivers till the wars were long done. He says everybody is fighting some folk called the Shawkin or the Sanchan or something like that. I never heard of them. Egwene knew. She thought she knew. Whatever it was gone. Are you all right? He asked. It's nothing to upset us here, my heart. Wars never touch the two rivers. We are too far from everywhere for anyone to care. I'm not upset. Did Jaime say anything else? Nothing you can believe. He sounded like a Copland. He said the peddler told him these people use Aes Sedai in battle, but then he claimed they offer 1,000 gold marks to anyone who turns an Aes Sedai over to them, and they kill anybody who hides one. It makes no sense. Well, it's nothing to trouble us. It is all a long way from here. Aes Sedai. Egwene touched her head. The way back comes but once. Be steadfast. She noticed Rand had a hand to his own head. The headaches? She asked. He nodded, his eyes suddenly tight. That powder Nynaeve gave me doesn't seem to be working the last few days. She hesitated. These headaches of his worried her. They grew worse every time they came now. And worst of all was something she had not noticed at first, something she almost wished she never had noticed. When Rand's head hurt, strange things happened soon after. Lightning out of a clear sky, smashing to bits that huge oak stump he'd been working 2 days to root out where he and Tam were clearing new field. Storms that Nynaeve did not hear coming when she listened to the wind. Wildfires in the forest. And the deeper his pain grew, the worse what followed. No one else had connected these things to Rand, not even Nynaeve, and Egwene was grateful for that. She did not want to think about what it might mean. That is plain stupid foolish, she told herself. I must know if I'm going to help him. Because she had a secret of her own, one that frightened her even as she tried to puzzle out what it meant. Nynaeve was teaching her the herbs, teaching Egwene to follow her as wisdom one day. Nynaeve's cures often worked in near miraculous fashion. Wounds healed with barely a scar, sick folk brought back from the edge of the grave. But 3 times now, Egwene had cured someone Nynaeve had given up for dead. 3 times she had sat to hold a hand through the last hour and seen the person get up from a deathbed. Nynaeve had questioned her closely on what she had done, what herbs she had used, in what blending. Thus far, she had not found the courage to admit that she had done nothing. I must have done something. Once might be chance, but 3 times? I have to figure it out. I have to learn. That set off a buzz in her head, as though the words were echoing inside her skull. If I could do something for them, I can help my husband. Let me try, Rand, she said. And as she stood through the open door, she saw a silver arch standing in front of the house, an arch filled with white light. The way back will come but once. Be steadfast. She took 2 steps toward the door before she could stop herself. She halted, looked back at Joya gurgling in her cradle, at Rand still pressing hand to his head and looking at her as if wondering where she was going. No, she said. No, this is what I want. This is what I want. Why can't I have this too? She did not understand her own words. Of course this was what she wanted, and she had it. What is it you want, Egwene? Rand asked. If it's anything I can get, you know I will. If I can't get it, I'll make it. The way back will come but once. Be steadfast. She took another step into the doorway. The silver arch beckoned her. Something waited on the other side. Something she wanted more than anything else in the world. Something she had to do. Egwene, There was a thump behind her. She looked over her shoulder to see Rand on his knees, bowed and head cradled in his hands. The pain had never hit him so hard. What will come after this? Ah, light, he panted. Light hurts. Light, it hurts worse than ever. Egwene? Be steadfast. It was waiting. Something she had to do. Had to. She took a step. It was hard. Harder than anything she had ever done in her life. Outside, toward the arch, behind her, Joya was laughing. Egwene! Egwene, I can't! He cut off with a loud groan. Steadfast. She stiffened her back and kept walking, but she could not keep the tears from rolling down her cheeks. Ram's groans built to a scream, drowning Joya's laughter. From the corner of her eye, Egwene saw Tam coming, running as hard as he could. He can't help, she thought, and tears became racking sobs. There is nothing he can do, but I could. I could. She stepped into the light and was consumed. Trembling and sobbing, Egwene stepped out of the arch, the same by which she had entered, memory cascading back with Shiriam's face confronting her. Cold, clear water washed away her tears as Elida slowly emptied a silver chalice over her head. Her weeping went on. She did not think it would ever end. You are washed clean, Elida pronounced, of what sin you may have done and of those done against you. You are washed clean of what crime you may have committed and of those committed against you. You come to us washed clean and pure in heart and soul. Light, Egwene thought as the water ran down her body. Let it be so. Can water wash away what I did? Her name was Joya, she told Shiriam between sobs. Joya, nothing can be worth what I... There is a price to become Aes Sedai, Shiriam replied, but the sympathy was back in her eyes, stronger than before. There is always a price. Was it real? Did I dream it? Weeping swallowed what she wanted to say. Did I leave him to die? Did I leave my baby? Shiriam put an arm around her shoulders, began guiding her around the circle of arches. Every woman I have ever watched come out of there has asked that question. The answer is no one knows. It has been speculated that perhaps some of those who do not come back chose to stay because they found a happier place and lived out their lives there. Her voice hardened. If it is real, and they stayed from choice, then I hope the lives they live are far from happy. I have no sympathy for any who run from their responsibilities. The edge on her tone softened slightly. Myself, I believe it is not real, but the danger is. Remember that. She stopped in front of the next glow-filled arch. Are you ready? Shifting her feet, Egwene nodded, and Shiriam took her arm away. The second time is for what is. The way back will come but once. Be steadfast. Egwene trembled. Whatever happens, it cannot be worse than the last. It cannot be. She stepped into the glow. She stared down at her dress, blue silk sewn with pearls, all dusty and torn. Her head came up and she took in the ruins of a great palace around her. The royal palace of Andor in Caemlyn. She knew that and wanted to scream. The way back will come but once. Be steadfast. The world was not the way she wanted it, no way that she could think of without wanting to cry, but all her tears had been cried away long ago, and the world was as it was. Ruin was what she expected to see. Careless of making more rips in her dress, but as careful of sound as a mouse, she climbed one of the piles of rubble and peered into the curving streets of the inner city. As far as she could see in every direction lay ruin and desolation, buildings that looked as if they had been torn apart by madmen, thick plumes of smoke rising from the fires still burning. There were people in the streets, bands of armed men prowling, searching, and Trollocs. The men shied away from the Trollocs, and the Trollocs snarled at them and laughed, harsh, guttural laughter. But they knew each other, worked together. A Myrddraal came striding down the street, its black cloak swaying gently with its steps, even when the wind gusted to drive dust and rubbish past it. Men and Trollocs alike cowered under its eyeless stare. Hunt. Its voice sounded like something long dead, crumbling. Do not stand there shivering. Find him. Egwene slipped back down the pile of jumbled stones as silently as she could. The way back will come but once. Be steadfast. She stopped, afraid the whisper had come from shadow spawn. In some way, though, she was sure it had not. Glancing back over her shoulder, half fearful of seeing the Myrddraal standing where she had just been, she hurried onward and into the ruined palace, climbing over fallen timbers, squeezing between heavy blocks of collapsed masonry as she made her way. Once she stepped on a woman's arm, sticking out from under a mound of plaster and bricks that had been an interior wall and perhaps part of the floor above. She noticed the arm as little as she noticed the great serpent ring on one finger. She had trained herself not to see the dead buried in the
Hey,
refuse heap,
Diamond.
trollops,
Hey,
and
D-Man,
dark
how you
stones of
doing?
native Camelin.
Yeah, I
She
finally
could do
finished that
nothing.
one that I was doing. Let me get it for you. I have it right
Forcing
here.
her way through a narrow gap where part of the ceiling had fallen, she found herself in a room half buried under what had stood above it. Rand lay with a heavy beam pinning him across the waist, his legs hidden beneath the stone blocks that filled half the room. Dust and sweat coated his face. He opened his eyes when she came near him. "You came back," he forced the words out in a hoarse rasp. "I was afraid. No matter. You have to help me." She sank wearily to the floor. "I could lift that beam easily with air, but as soon as it moves, everything else will come down on top of you, on top of both of us. I cannot manage all of it, Rand." His laugh was bitter and painful, and cut off almost as soon as it began. Fresh sweat glistened on his face, and he spoke with an effort. "I could shift the beam myself. You know that. I could shift that and the stones above, all of them. But I have to let go of myself to do it, and I can't trust that. I cannot trust..." He stopped, wheezing for breath. "I do not understand," she said slowly. "Let go of yourself? What can't you trust? The way back will come but once. Be steadfast." She rubbed her hands roughly over her ears. "The madness, Egwene. I am actually holding it at bay." His gasping laugh made her skin prickle. "But it takes everything I have just to do that. If I let go, even a little, even for an instant, the madness will have me. I won't care what I do then. You have to help me." "How, Rand? I've tried everything I know. Tell me how, and I will do it." His hand flopped out, fell just short of a dagger lying in the dust, bare-bladed. "The dagger," he whispered. His hand made a painful journey back to his chest. "Here, in the heart. Kill me." She stared at him, at the dagger, as if they were both poisonous serpents. "No, Rand, I will not. I cannot. How could you ask such a thing?" Slowly his hand crept back toward the dagger. His fingers came short again. He strained, moaning, brushed it with a fingertip. Before he could try again, she kicked it away from him.
Now I
He
just gotta
collapsed with a sob.
get
"Tell
a
me
frame
why,"
for it
she demanded.
because I already.
"Why would you ask me to murder you? I will heal you.
I've already
I
sealed
will
it,
do anything to get you out of there, but I cannot kill you."
so I just gotta
"Why?"
frame it and
"They can
it'll be
turn me,
finished.
Egwene."
But
His
I
breathing
finally
was
finished
so
it.
tortured,
Only
she
took
wished
me
she could weep. "If they
over a
take
month.
me, the Murdral, the Dreadlords, they can turn me to the Shadow. If madness has me, I cannot fight them. I won't know what they are doing till it is too late. If there is even a spark of life left when they find me,
Yeah,
they can
that one
still
you're
do it.
doing, it probably would
Please,
that would
Egwene,
take me
for the love of the light, kill me."
definitely take me
"I
over a
can't,
week,
Rand.
or I mean over a
Light,
month.
help me, I cannot."
If this one took
"The
me
way
over a
back will
month,
come
the
but
one
once.
like you're doing, that'd definitely
Be
take me over a
steadfast."
month or two.
She looked over her shoulder, and a silver arch filled with white light took up most of the open space among the rubble.
But I'm doing a smaller one right
"Egwene,
now.
help me."
Cause I have another
Be
one that's that
steadfast.
same size.
She stood and took a step toward the
Just
arch. It was right there in front of her. One more step and... "Please, Egwene, help me. I can't reach it. For the love
yeah,
of
it's
the
just that
light,
same.
Egwene,
I think that size,
help
but a little bit
me.
bigger too.
I cannot kill you," she
I'm just
whispered.
doing a smaller one.
"I can't. Forgive me."
Oh, it's
She stepped forward.
called the Dragon
"Help me,
Reborn.
Egwene!" Light
It's a
burned her to
series.
ash. Staggering, she
It's a
stepped out
book
of the arch,
in
neither
Wheel of
noticing her
Time
nakedness
series.
nor caring. A shudder ran through her, and she covered her mouth with both hands. "I couldn't, Rand," she whispered. "I couldn't. Please forgive me. Light, help him. Please, Light, help Rand." Cold water poured over her head. You are washed clean of false pride, Elida intoned.
Nice.
You are washed clean of false ambition. You come to us washed clean in heart and
There's
soul.
one I was looking
As
at.
the Red Sister turned away,
That's it's
Shiriam
on my
gently
watch
took
list.
Egwene's shoulders and guided her toward the last arch. One more, child. One
It's
more.
a lot bigger
and
than
it is
this one
done.
that I just got done doing.
He said they could turn him to the shadow, Egwene mumbled. He said the Murdral and the Dreadlords could force him. Shiriam missed a step and looked around quickly. Elida was almost back to the table. The Aes Sedai surrounding the ter'angreal stared at it, seeming lost to anything else. An unpleasant thing to talk of, child, Shiriam said finally and softly. Come.
The
One
one
more.
I'm looking at now to
Can
get,
they?
it's
Egwene insisted. Custom, Shiriam said,
it's
is not to
100
speak of what
centimeters
happens
by
within
50
the
centimeters.
ter'angreal. A woman's fears are her own. Can they? Shiriam sighed, glanced at the other Aes Sedai again, then dropped her
I don't know
voice
you'll
to
be
a
able
whisper
to
and
see
spoke
it
swiftly.
with it being this bright.
This is something known only to a few, child, even in the tower. You should not learn it now, if ever, but I will tell you. There is
But
a
it's
weakness in being able to channel. That we learn to open ourselves to the true source means that we can be open to other things. Egwene shuddered. Calm yourself,
but that's
child.
gonna be the
It is
next
not
one
so
I'm gonna be
easily
ordering.
done. It is a thing
And
not
it's
done, so far as I know. Light send it has not been done since the Trolloc Wars. It took 13 Dreadlords, dark friends who could channel, weaving the flows through 13 Murdral. You see? Not easily done. There are no Dreadlords today. This is a secret of the
100 by
tower, child.
100.
If others knew,
Yeah,
we
this
could never
one's
convince
100
them
by
they were
50.
safe. Only one who can channel can be turned in this way. The weakness of our strength. Everyone else is as safe as a fortress. Only their own deeds and will can turn them to the shadow.
And that's gonna be
13,
pushing because, like I said,
Egwene
my
said in a tiny
area
voice.
that I
The same
do,
number
that's
who
a
left the
real
tower.
small area.
Leandrin
So
and 12 more.
that one that
Shiriam's
I
face
just got
hardened.
done doing,
That is nothing for
that
you to
one's
dwell on. You will forget it. Her voice climbed to a normal volume.
that one's pushing it on
The
my in
third
that
time
area the
is
way I
for
had
what
to
will
do it.
be. The way back will come but once. Be steadfast. Egwene stared at the glowing arch, stared at some far distance beyond it. Leandrin and 12 others.
But the one I'm doing
13
now
dark
is
friends who can channel.
it's a smaller
Might
one.
help us
Well,
all.
a
She
lot
stepped
smaller
into the
than
light.
this one.
It filled her. It shone through her. It burned her to the bones, seared her to the soul. She flashed incandescent in the light. Light, help me! There was nothing but the light. And the pain. Egwene stared into the standing mirror and was not sure whether she was more surprised by the ageless smoothness of her face or the striped stole that hung around her neck. The stole of the Amerlin seat. The way back will come but once. Be steadfast. 13. She swayed, caught at the mirror, and almost toppled it and herself to the blue-tiled floor of her dressing chamber. Something is wrong, she thought. The wrongness had nothing to do with her sudden dizziness, or at least that was not what felt wrong. It was something else. But she had no idea what.
Yeah,
There was
but
an
100
Aes
by
Sedai at
100,
her
that'd
elbow,
be
a woman with
insane.
Shiriam's high
It would
cheekbones,
have,
but
for me,
dark
it would
hair
have to
and
be,
concerned brown eyes, and the hand-wide
it'd have
stole
to
of
be
the
the right
keeper on her
picture.
shoulders. Not Shiriam, though. Egwene had never seen her before. She was sure she knew her as well as she knew herself. Haltingly,
Or
she
if it's
put a
for
name to
someone
the woman.
else,
Veldine.
it'd have to be for the right price
Are
because
you
that's
ill,
gonna
mother?
kill my back.
Her stole is green.
That one
That means she was
did a
raised
number on
from
my
green
back
Aja.
just because
The keeper always comes
how
from the
much I
same
was putting
Aja as the
into it.
Amerlin she serves. Which means if I'm the Amerlin, then I was green Aja too. That thought shook her. Not that she had been green Aja, but that she had to reason it out. Light, something is wrong with me. The way back will come, but... The voice in her head trailed away to finish in a buzz. 13 dark friends. I am well, Veldine, Egwene said. The name felt strange on her tongue. It felt as if she had been saying it for years. We mustn't keep them waiting. Who waiting? She did not know, except that she felt infinitely sad about ending that wait, endlessly reluctant. They will be growing impatient, Mother. There was a hesitation in Veldine's voice, as if she felt the same reluctance as Egwene, but for a different reason. Unless Egwene missed her guess, behind that outer calm, Beldine was terrified. In that case, we had best be about it. Beldine nodded, then took a deep breath before crossing the carpet to where her staff of office, topped with the snowdrop white flame of Tar
Yeah, but the
Valon,
one I'm doing
stood
now,
propped
D-Man,
beside the door.
it's
I suppose we must, Mother.
it's like an
She took up
owl.
the staff and opened the door for Egwene, then hurried ahead so that they made a procession of two, Keeper of the Chronicles leading the Amerlin seat. Egwene noticed little of the corridors they took. All her attention was directed inward. What is the matter with me? Why can't
Looks
I
like
remember?
a owl
Why
made
is
of
so much
leaves
of what I
and branches
almost remember wrong?
inside of a forest.
She touched the 7-striped stole on her shoulders. Why am I half sure I'm still a novice? The way back will come, but what? This time it ended abruptly. 13 of the Black Aja. She stumbled at that. It was a frightening thought, but it chilled her to the marrow beyond fear. It felt personal. She wanted to scream, to run and hide. She felt as if they were after her. Nonsense. The Black Aja has been destroyed. That seemed an odd thought, too. Part of her remembered something called the Great Purge. Part of her was sure no such thing had happened. Eyes fixed ahead, Beldine had not noticed her stumble. Egwene had to lengthen her stride to catch up. This woman is scared to her toenails. What in the light is she taking me to? Beldine stopped before tall, paired doors, their dark wood each inlaid with a large silver flame of Tar Valon. She wiped her hands on her dress as if they were suddenly sweaty, before opening one door and leading Egwene up a straight ramp of the same silver-streaked white stone that made Tar Valon's walls. Even here it seemed to shine. The ramp led into a large, circular room under a domed ceiling at least 30 paces high. A raised platform ran around the outer edge of the room, fronted by steps, except where this ramp and two others came out, spaced equally around the circle. The flame of Tar Valon lay centered in the floor, surrounded by widening spirals of color, the colors of the 7 Ajas. At the opposite side of the room
Are you
from where
working
the
on
ramp
yours
entered,
tonight,
a
D-Man?
high-backed chair stood, heavy and ornately carved in vines and leaves, painted in the colors of all the Ajas. Beldine rapped her staff sharply on the floor. There was a tremor in her voice. She comes. The Keeper of the Seals. The Flame of Tar Valon. The Amerlin seat. She comes. With a rustle of skirts, shawled women on the platform got up from their chairs. 21 chairs in groupings of 3, each triad painted and cushioned in the same color as the fringe on the shawls of the women who stood before them. The hall of the tower, Egwene thought as she crossed the floor to her chair. The Amerlin seat's chair. That's all that is. The hall of the tower and the sitters for the Ajas. I've been here thousands of times, but she could not remember one of them. What am I doing in the hall of the tower? Light, they'll skin me alive when they see. She was not sure what it was they would see, only that she prayed they did not. The way back will come, but the way back will... The way... The Black Aja waits. That, at least, was whole. It came from everywhere. Why did no one else seem to hear it? Sitting in the chair of the Amerlin seat, the chair
Hell
that was
yeah,
also the Amerlin seat,
Carol, thank
she
you.
realized she had no idea what to
Appreciate
do next.
it.
The other Aes Sedai had
Yeah, I've
seated
been playing a
themselves
Wheel of
when
Time
she
for
did,
a minute.
all but
I
Beldine,
started
who
over
stood
again
beside
because I
her with the
forgot where I
staff,
left off at.
swallowing nervously.
But I'll
They all
play
seemed to
the
be waiting
whole
on
book
her.
through, like
Begin,
how it
she
has
said
part
finally.
5.
It seemed to be enough.
When I stop my
One
live
of the red
tonight,
sitters stood.
I'll stop the
Egwene
book.
was shocked
Then
to
I start
recognize
it back up
Elida.
again
At the
tomorrow.
same time, she knew that Elida was the foremost of the sitters for the red, and her own bitterest enemy. The look on Elida's face as she stared across the chamber made Egwene shiver inside. It was stern and cold, and triumphant. It promised things best
Because
not
I did
thought
that
of.
one, and I have
Bring him in,
this other one that
Elida said loudly.
I finished also.
From one of the ramps, not the one Egwene had entered by, came the crunch of boots on stone. People appeared. A dozen Aes Sedai surrounding 3 men, 2 of them burly guards with the white teardrops of the flame of Tar Valon on their chests. tugging the chains in which the third stumbled as if dazed. Egwene jerked forward in her chair. The chained man was Rand. Eyes
That's
half
another one
closed,
that I did.
head
It's a lot
sagging,
smaller
he
than the
seemed
other
nearly
one.
asleep, moving only as the chains directed. This man, Elida proclaimed, has named himself the Dragon Reborn.
Like on the
There
Wheel
was a
of
buzz of
Time,
distaste,
I've read.
not as if the listeners were
I've actually read the
surprised,
books
but as though it were not
a
something
couple
they wanted
times
to
through.
hear. This man has channeled the one power. The buzz was louder now, disgusted and tinged with fear.
Definitely
There is
appreciate you
only
stopping
one
by, though.
penalty for this, known and recognized in every nation, but pronounced only here, in Tar Valon, in the hall of the tower. I call on the Amerlin seat to pronounce the sentence of gentling on this man. Elida's eyes glittered at Egwene. Rand, what do I do? Light, what do I do? Why do you hesitate? Elida demanded. The sentence has been set down for 3,000 years. Why do you hesitate, Egwene Alvear? One of the green sitters was on her feet, anger bright through her calm. Shame, Elida. Show respect for the Amerlin seat. Show respect for the mother. Respect, Elida answered coldly, can be lost as well as won. Well, Egwene, can it be you show your weakness, your unfitness for your office at last? Can it be you will not pronounce sentence on this man? Rand tried to lift his head and failed. Egwene struggled to her feet, head spinning, trying to remember she was the Amerlin seat, with the power to command all these women, screaming that she was a novice, that she did not belong here, that something was dreadfully wrong. No, she said shakily. No, I cannot. I will not. She betrays herself. Elida's shout drowned out Egwene's attempt to speak. She condemns herself out of her own mouth. Take her. As Egwene opened her mouth, Beldine moved beside her. Then the keeper's staff struck her head. Blackness. First there was pain.
Oh, there's
in
a
her
lot
head.
of books. This
There was something
is
hard under her back and cold.
book 3.
Next came the voices. Murmurs.
In
Is she
book
still
1
unconscious?
is
It was a rasp, a file on
one of the
the
shorter books in the series.
Do not worry, a woman said from far, far
I
away.
just got done
She
playing
sounded uneasy,
book
afraid,
1 and book
trying
2
not
already.
to show either. She will be dealt with before
But
she
I
knows
think
what is
I
happening
stopped
to her.
on, let me
Then she is
see.
ours, to do with as we will. Perhaps we will give her to you for sport.
I think the one when I
After
started,
you make
the
your
last
own use
one
of her.
that I ended
Of
up
course. The distant voices moved
losing track
further
on.
away.
I think that one was.
Her hand brushed
Give me 1
against her
second.
leg, touched bare, pebbly flesh. She
Because
opened
I
her
was
eyes to flash.
on.
She was naked, bruised, lying on a rough wooden table in what seemed to be a disused storeroom.
I was on book 12, but
Splinters
I ended
stuck
up
her
starting back over
There was a
again.
metallic taste of blood in her mouth.
Just, I
A
guess,
cluster
catch
of
people
Aes
up
Sedai
again.
stood to one side of the room, talking among themselves, voices low yet urgent.
Because you're on the
pain
eye
in
of
her
the
head
world.
made thinking difficult,
And
but it
this is
seemed
book 3.
important to count them. 13. Another group, black-cloaked and hooded men, joined the Aes Sedai, who seemed caught between cowering and trying to dominate with their presence. One of the men turned his head to look toward the table. The dead white face within the hood had no eyes. Egwene had no need to count the Murdral.
It's a really good series.
13 Murdral, and 13 Aes Sedai.
Whatever you do,
Without another thought, she screamed
don't
in
watch
pure
the TV
terror.
series.
Yet even in the midst of fear that tried to
Because
split her bones,
they
she
don't
reached
go
out
along
for
with
the
the
true
book.
source, clawed desperately for
The
sight.
characters, yes,
She's
like
awake.
names and
She cannot
whatnot,
be,
but
not yet. Shield her, quickly,
they
quickly.
don't
cut her
follow
off
the
from source.
storyline of the book. They
It's too
change
late,
stuff.
she's too
So,
strong.
if you've
Seize her.
seen
Hurry.
the series,
Hands reached for her
and you
arms
want
and
to start the
legs.
book,
Pasty pale hands like slugs
the
under
books
rock,
are a lot better than
ordered
the
by
TV
minds
series
behind
because
pale, eyeless faces.
they messed up that
If
TV
those
series.
hands touched her
I
flesh,
was
she knew she would go mad. The power
really
filled her.
disappointed in that series.
Flames burst from Murdral's skin, ripping through black cloth as if they were solid daggers of fire. Shrieking half-men crisped and burned
I
like
think there's
oil
like
paper.
15 or 16 books
Fist-sized
to the
chunks of
series.
stone tore themselves free of the walls and whizzed across the room, producing shrieks and grunts as they thudded into flesh. The air stirred, shifted. howled into a whirlwind. Slowly, painfully, Egwene pushed herself off the table. The wind whipped her hair
But
and made her
it might
stagger,
spoil
but she
some
continued
stuff
to
for
grab it
you.
as she stumbled toward the door. An Aes Sedai
It's
loomed
because
in front
you
of her, a woman
know what's
bruised and
going on
bleeding,
like 2 books ahead
surrounded
of
by the
time.
glow of the power. A woman with death in her dark eyes. Egwene's mind put a name to the face. Gildan, Elida's closest confidant, always whispering together in corners, closeting themselves in the night. Egwene's mouth tightened. Disdaining stones and wind, she balled up her fist and punched Gildan between the eyes as hard as she could. The red
I hope
sister,
it doesn't,
the
but
black sister, crumpled as if her bones had melted. Rubbing her knuckles, Egwene staggered out into the hall. Thank you, Perrin, she thought, for showing me how to do that. But you didn't tell me how much it hurts when you do. Shoving the door shut against the wind, she channeled. Stones around the doorway shivered, cracked, settled against the wood. It would not hold them for long, but anything that slowed pursuit for even a minute was worth doing. Minutes might mean life. Gathering her strength, she forced herself to break into a run. It wobbled, but at least it was a run. She must find some clothes, she decided. A woman clothed had more authority than the same woman naked,
nice.
and she was going to need every bit of
I
authority.
read
They would look
Dune
for
and
her first in her room.
I've read
She had
most of the
spare
Dark
dress and
Tower. I
shoes
still
in her
gotta
study,
finish it.
and another stole, and that
Game
was
of
not
Thrones,
far
I'm
off.
2 books in.
It was unnerving, trotting through empty hallways. The
The
White
Dark
Tower no
Materials I
longer
haven't
held the
started.
numbers it once had, but there was usually someone about. The loudest
Yeah, but
sound was the slap
I
of her
was
bare soles on the tiles.
looking forward
She hurried through
to
the
the TV
antechamber of
series
her
because
study to the inner room, and at
once you
last
get
she
into the
found someone.
books,
Beldine was
you'll
sitting
be.
on the floor,
At least
head in her
I was
hands,
like, man, I can't wait till they make a
Egwene stopped
movie or
warily as
TV
Beldine
series about
raised
it. And
reddened eyes to
when
meet
they
hers.
did, I was looking forward
No
to it.
glow of Saidar
Then I
surrounded
saw the
it either,
series,
but
and
Egwene was still
it
cautious
was
and
just
confident. She could not
disappointing.
see her own glow, of course, but the power, surging
Oh
through
yeah,
her
I
would
read a
hurt,
lot too.
especially when added to her secret.
Dark
Beldine
Tower, I
scrubbed a
like just
hand
because
across
I like
tear-stained
Stephen King.
cheeks. I had to. You must understand. I had to.
I've tried playing the Dark Tower
they-
series on here,
She
but
took a deep, shuddering breath. It all came out
I
in a
can't
rush.
because I always get
3 nights ago, they took me while I slept and
they
stilled
make
me.
it to where I
Her
gotta
voice rose
delete
to a
my
near
video.
shriek. They stilled me. I cannot channel
But
any longer.
this one I'm able to play.
Egwene breathed.
Just that,
The rush of
not
Saidar
Stephen
cushioned
King.
her against the shock.
Which is
The light
disappointing because I
helped and
wanted to
comforted
do
you, my daughter.
the
Why
Dark
didn't you tell
Tower
me? I would have.
series
She let it
as
trail
far as playing
away,
audiobooks,
knowing
but
there was nothing she could do.
YouTube won't allow it.
What would you have done? What?
It allows me to play
Nothing.
this one
There's nothing you can do.
and some of the other
But
ones I
they said they
played.
could give it back to me with the power of the Dark One. Her eyes squeezed shut, leaking tears. They hurt me, Mother, and they made me. Oh, Light, they hurt me. Elida told me they would make me whole again, make me able to channel again if I obeyed. That's why I
I've
had
done
to. So Elida is
the
Black
Dark Elf
Aja,
trilogy.
Egwene said grimly.
I've done
A
that
narrow
one,
wardrobe stood against the wall, and in it hung a
and
green
I've
silk
done
dress, kept for when she had no
I've done some
time to return to her
Lovecraft,
rooms.
but
A striped
H.P.
stole
Lovecraft,
hung beside
I
the
could
dress.
do all of that
She began
because
to dress herself.
at least Lovecraft,
What have they done with Rand?
a lot of his
Where have they taken
stories
him?
fall
Answer me, Beldine.
under public
Where is
domain,
Rand
so
Al'Thor?
free use.
Beldine huddled,
And I've
lips
done
trembling, eyes
some
turned
H.G.
bleakly inward.
Wells,
But finally she
like The
roused
Time
herself
Machine,
enough to
The
say,
Invisible Man,
The Traitor's Court, Mother.
and
They
those
took him to the Traitor's Court.
also fall
Shivers
under
assaulted
public
Egwene.
domain, so free
Shivers of
use.
fear, shivers of rage.
My books are
Elida
mixed
had not
between
waited, not even an hour.
public
The Traitor's
domain
Court was
and
used for only 3 purposes.
like these ones.
Executions, the stilling of an Aes Sedai, or the gentling of a man who could channel. But all of the 3 took an order from the Amerlin seat. So who wears the stole out there? Elida, she was sure. But how could she make them accept her so quickly, with me not tried, not sentenced? There cannot be another Amerlin until I've been stripped of stole and staff, and they'll not find that easy to do. Light. Rand! She started for the door. What can you do, Mother? Beldine cried. What can you do? It was not clear whether she meant for Rand or for herself. More than anyone suspects, Egwene said.
Yeah, well,
never
I
held
have
the
some
oath, Rod,
gameplay in
Beldine.
there. So
Beldine's gasp followed her
doing
from
some
the room.
PS5 and a lot
Egwene's
of audio
memory still
books.
played hide and seek with her. She knew no woman could achieve the shawl and the ring without pledging
I had
the
a
3
start of
oaths with
the
the oath rod firmly
gunslinger,
in
but
hand, the Turon
I
Real
couldn't
sealing
finish it
her to
off
keep those oaths
because
as if they had been engraved on her
I
bones
got in
at
trouble
birth.
with YouTube.
No woman became Aes Sedai without being bound to them. Yet she knew that somehow, in some fashion she could not begin to dredge up, she had done just that. Her shoes clicked swiftly as she ran. At least she knew now why the halls were empty. Every Aes Sedai, except perhaps those she had left in the storeroom, every accepted, every novice, even all the servants, would be gathered in the traitor's court, according to custom, to watch the will of Tar Valon made fact. And the warders would be ringing the courtyard against the possibility that someone might try to free the man to be gentled. The remnants of
Sometimes
Buer
I remember
armies had
to
attempted
put like
it
part
at the
one as
end of
far as
what
like
some called the
the
War of the
parts
Second
like
Dragon,
when I'm leaving
just
off,
before
but
Arthur Hawkwing's rise had given Tar
some of the
Valon
times I
other things
wasn't.
to worry it. And so had Rowlin Darksbane's followers long years earlier. Whether Rand had any followers or not, she could not remember, but warders remembered such things and guarded
But
against
now
them.
I think I have
If
some of when I
Ermida
was
or
doing
another truly did wear the
some of my
scroll of the
diamond
Amarant,
art.
the warders might
Whenever I
well
was
not
doing
admit
that
her to
too.
the traitor's court. She knew she could force a way in. It would need to be done quickly. There was no point if Rand was gentled while
So
she
there's
was
not very
still
much
wrapping warders in air.
of any Stephen
Even
King there
warders would
except
break
for
if she loosed
the
the
start
lightnings
of
on
one
them and
book.
baled fire
Now I
and
don't
broke
think
the
that. I
ground
think I
under
had to
their
mute
feet.
that one.
Balefire, she wondered. But it would also do no good if she broke Tar Valon's power to save Rand. She had to save both.
Because there's a
Well
lot of the
short
Wheel
of the
Time
ways that led to
series.
the traitor's court, she turned aside and climbed up stairs and ramps that grew
I think this
narrower and
is
tighter
the
the higher she went,
second
until she
time
thrust open a
I've
trapdoor
done.
and climbed out onto a sloping tower roof, a roof
It's
of nearly
started
white
from the
tiles.
beginning.
From there she could see across other roofs,
I'm slowly
past
getting the
other
hang of
towers, into the
numbering the
broad
order that
open
they
well
go
of the
in.
traitor's court.
Some, at least
The court was
the
crowded
books.
except for a cleared space in the middle. People filled the windows overlooking it, crowded the balconies
I
and
have
even the rooftops, but she could make out
like
the
the
lone
Wheel
man,
Time. I have
small
some
at that distance,
R.A.
swinging in his chains in
Salvatore
the center of the cleared space.
or Salvatore,
Man,
however you say his last
12
name.
Aes Sedai surrounded
H.G.
him, and
Wells,
another, who
H.P.
Egwene knew
Lovecraft.
had to be wearing a 7-striped stole, even though she could not distinguish it, stood before Rand. Elida. The words she must be saying crept into Egwene's head.
Yeah.
This man,
This one doesn't
abandoned of the
exactly
light,
fall
has
under
touched
that, but
Saidin, the male half of the true
they
source.
still let me do this
Thus
one
do we hold
and a
him.
couple other
Most
ones.
abominably has this man channeled the one power,
I
knowing that
started
Saidin is tainted
that
by the
one
Dark
book,
One, tainted for men's pride,
Ready Player
tainted
One.
for men's sin.
I
Thus
started
do we
that. I
chain
was a
him.
good
Forcefully,
hour,
Egwene
2
pushed
hours
the rest
in,
of it
and
out of
then
her thoughts.
YouTube
13
straight
Aes
went and
Sedai,
killed my
12
stream
sisters and the Amerlin, the
because I was
traditional
playing
number
that
for
book.
gentling. The same number as for... She rid herself of that, too. She had no time for anything but what she was there to do. If she could only manage to reason
But a
out
lot
how.
of them I could get away
At
with.
that
Just
distance,
certain
she
ones
thought she
like
could manage to lift him with air,
Stephen
pick him
King.
right out of the circle of Aes Sedai and float him
I
straight to
think
her.
I
Maybe.
played
Even if she could find the strength, even if she did not drop him to his death halfway,
the first book
it
of
would
Game
be a
of
slow
Thrones
process,
on
with
here
him
and
a
got away
helpless
with
target
it.
for archers, and the glow of
I just haven't
Saidar
tried
pointing out her own position for any Aes Sedai who looked.
doing book
Any
2 yet.
Myrddraal, for that matter. Light, she muttered. There's no other way short of starting a war inside the White Tower, and I may do that anyway. She gathered the power, separated skeins, directed flows. The way back will come but once. Be steadfast. It had been so long since she last heard those words that she gave a start, slipped on the smooth tiles, barely caught herself short of the edge.
I got a lot of his books on my
She looked over
Audible.
her shoulder. There on the tower top, tilted to sit flat against the
Then
sloping tiles,
my
was a
friend
silver
actually
arch
gave
filled
me
with a glowing light. The
the
arch flickered and
full
wavered. Streaks of
Dark
angry
Tower
red and yellow
series
darted through the white light.
narrated by Stephen
The way
King,
back will come but once.
but
Be
it was
steadfast.
on
The
cassette.
archway thinned
So it
to
actually,
transparency,
I had to get a
grew
cassette
solid
player to
again.
play it.
Frantic, Egwene gazed toward the traitor's court. There had to be time. There had to be. All she needed was a few minutes, perhaps 10, and luck. Voices bored into her head. Not the
I just
disembodied,
wish I could get away
unknowable
with playing
voice
a lot
that
of
warned
his
her to be steadfast, but
on
women's
YouTube,
voices she almost
but
believed she knew.
it's okay. I could play
Can't hold much longer.
The Wheel of
If she
Time.
does
I could
not come
play
out now,
a lot of other
hold!
ones that I like
Hold,
listening
burn
to.
you, or I'll gut you all like
But
sturgeons. Going wild, mother.
it's okay.
I can't.
I could deal
The
with that.
voices faded to a drone, the drone to silence, but the unknowable spoke again. The way back will come but once. Be steadfast. There is a
Nice.
price to be
Oh,
Aes
yeah.
Sedai. The Black Ajah waits. With a scream of rage, of loss, Egwene threw herself at the arch as it shimmered like a heat haze. She almost wished she would miss and plunge to her death. Light plucked her apart, fiber by fiber, sliced
I
the
remember
fibers to
having
hairs,
some of the books
split the
of
hairs
the
to
Wheel of
wisps of
Time and
nothing.
the Iron
All
World.
drifted apart on the light. Forever.
Whenever I was reading it, it was about
Chapter
about that thick.
23. Sealed.
I think it was like,
Light pulled her apart,
I remember, I
fiber
think it
by
was like
fiber,
900
sliced the
pages.
fibers to hairs that drifted apart, burning,
Not including
drifting and burning.
it
Forever.
has like a little gloss in the,
Forever.
at least in the paperback books or the
Egwene
book
stepped out of the
books.
silver arch, cold
And the
and
very back of
stiff
it had
with
like
anger.
a
She
little
wanted the
glossary
iciness of anger to counter the
to
searing
help
of
you
memory.
pronounce some of
Her
the
body
the
remembered burning,
names
but other memories
and some of the
scored
words
and
they
scorched
use,
more
and
deeply.
gives you like a little
Anger
definition of them
cold as death.
or a brief description.
Is that all there is for me? She demanded. To abandon him again and again? To betray him, fail him
Yeah,
again
all
and again?
the Wheel of
Is
Time
that
ones I
what there
have
is
right
for
now
me?
are on my
Suddenly
Audible.
she realized that all was not as it should be.
I don't
The
got very
Amarlin was
much on
there
my
now, as
Kindle because I got a
Egwene
little
had been
Kindle
taught she
Fire.
would be, and a shawled sister from each Ajah,
They
but they
call
all
them door
stared at her
stoppers.
luridly. 2 Aes Sedai now sat at each place around the
Remember having them
ter'angreal,
that
sweat running
you
down
could
their
tell
faces.
on the
The
spine that
ter'angreal
how
hummed,
much use
almost
there
vibrated,
was in it,
and
how much
violent
I've read
streaks
it,
of color
and then
tore the white light inside the arches.
all the little
The
pages here
glow
and
of
there having
Saidar
the
briefly
little
enveloped
dog ears on
Shiriam
it
as she
from
put a hand on
folding
Egwene's
the
head,
corner of the
sending a
page
new
down
chill through
because I
her.
never had
She
bookmarks
is well. The mistress of
like
novices
where you
sounded
put the
relieved.
bookmarker in there and save
She
your
is
page.
unharmed,
I never
as
had
if she had
those,
not
so
expected it.
I'd always
Tension seemed to
fold
go
a
out of the
corner of
other
the
Aes
page.
Sedai facing
And the
Egwene.
corner that I
Elida
would
let out a
fold
long
would be
breath, then
the
hurried away
page
for
that I
the
would
last
start on.
chalice.
If it was on
Only the Aes
folded on
Sedai
this
around
side,
the ter'angreal did not
we started
relax.
on that page
The
and then
hum
go
had
on to that
lessened,
page.
and the light began the flickering that signaled the ter'angreal was settling toward quiescence, but those Aes Sedai looked as if they were fighting it every inch of the way. What happened? Egwene asked. Be silent, Shiriam said, but gently. For now, be silent. You are well, that is the main thing, and we must complete the ceremony. Elida came, close to running, and handed the final silver chalice to the Amarlin. Egwene hesitated only a moment before kneeling. What happened? The Amarlin emptied the chalice slowly over Egwene's head. You are washed clean of Egwene Alvear from Emond's
Right.
Field. You are washed clean of all ties that bind you to the world. You come to us washed clean in heart and soul. You are Egwene Alvear, accepted of the White Tower. The last drop splashed onto Egwene's hair. You are sealed to us now.
Because I have a Kindle Fire, I
The
don't
last
really have
words
any
seemed to
books
have a
on it,
special meaning,
mainly
just
because
between Egwene and the Amarlin. The
the
Amarlin
prices
thrust
for the
the
books
chalice
that you
at one of the
pay
other
for
Aes Sedai and
to
produced a
get
gold
like on
ring in
your
the shape of a
on the
serpent,
Kindle
biting its own tail.
is a lot more than
Despite herself, Egwene trembled as she
what you would
raised her
pay
left
if you
hand, trembled
went
again as the
to
Amarlin slipped the
I said
great
a
serpent
bookstore,
ring
but I don't
onto
even
the
know
third
there's any
finger.
bookstores
When
anymore.
she became Aes Sedai, she could wear
It's
the
a
ring on the
lot
finger
less
she
going
chose,
and buying,
or not at all if it was
say, the
necessary to
paperback
hide
of
who
it
she was,
than
but the
it is
accepted wore
buying
it
it for
there.
the Kindle. It's like a lot
Unsmiling,
more in
the
the
Amarlin
price,
pulled her to her feet. Welcome, daughter, she said,
which I
kissing
don't
her cheek.
understand.
Egwene was surprised to feel a thrill. Not child, but daughter. Always before she had been child. The Amarlin kissed her other cheek. Welcome. Stepping back, the Amerlin regarded her critically, but spoke to Shiriam.
I think I bought like a
Get her dry
paperback
and
of
into some clothes,
the Eye of the
then be
World
certain she is well.
a while back for like, I
Certain,
think it was
you
like
understand?
a little bit over
I
10
am
bucks.
certain, Mother. Shiriam sounded
I'm not
surprised.
sure what it is on
You saw me
the
delve her.
Kindle. I think it was a
The
little bit more
Amerlin
than that.
grunted, and her eyes shifted to the Turang Rial. I mean to know what went wrong tonight. She strode away in the direction of her glare, skirts swaying purposefully. Most of the other Aes Sedai joined her around the Turang Rial, now only a silver structure of arches on a ring. The mother is worried about you, Shiriam said as she drew Egwene to one side, to where there was a thick towel for her hair and another for the rest of her. How much reason did she have? Egwene asked. The Amerlin wants nothing to happen to her hound till the deer is pulled down. Shiriam did not answer. She merely frowned slightly, then waited until Egwene was dry before handing her a white dress, banded at the bottom with 7 rings. She slipped into that dress with the flash of disappointment. She was one of the accepted, with the ring on her finger and the bands on her dress. Why don't I feel any different? Elida came over, her arms filled with Egwene's novice dress and shoes, her belt and pouch, and the papers Varen had given her. In Elida's hands. Egwene made herself wait for the Aes Sedai to hand the bundle to her rather than snatch them away. Thank you, Aes Sedai. She tried to eye the papers surreptitiously. She could not tell if they had been disturbed. The string was still tied. How would I know if she's read all of them? Squeezing her pouch under cover of the novice dress, she felt the peculiar ring, the Turang Rial, inside. At least that's still here. Might she could have taken that, and I don't know that I would have minded. Yes, I would. I think I would. Elida's face was as cold as her voice. I did not want you to be brought forward tonight.
Yeah.
Not because I feared what happened. No one could foresee that.
That you
But
got a
because of
point
what
there
you
too.
are, a wilder.
The way everything's jacked up
Egwene
in
tried to
prices.
protest, but Elida kept on, as implacable as a mountain glacier. Oh, I know you learned to channel under Aes Sedai teaching, but you are still a wilder. A wilder in spirit, a wilder in ways. You have vast potential, else you would never have survived in there tonight. But potential changes nothing. I do not believe you will ever be part of the White Tower, not in the way the rest of us are, no matter on which finger you wear your ring. It would have been better for you had you settled for learning enough to stay alive and gone back to your sleepy village. Far better. Turning on her heel, she stalked away, out of the chamber. If she isn't Black Aja, Egwene thought sourly, she's the next thing to it. Aloud, she muttered to Shiriam, you could have said something. You could have helped me. I would have helped a novice, child, Shiriam replied calmly, and Egwene winced.
Oh, no problem.
She
I'm
was
glad
back
you
to
found it
child
too.
again. I try to protect novices
I
when they
usually
need
do
it,
them
since they
about
cannot
pretty late
protect
like this,
themselves.
just because it's around the time
You
I go
are
to bed.
accepted now.
But
It is time
you
for
have a
you
good
to
night
learn to
too.
protect yourself. Egwene studied Shiriam's eyes, wondering if she had imagined an emphasis on that last sentence. Shiriam had had as much opportunity as Elida to read the list of names, to decide that Egwene was mixed in with the Black Aja. Light, you're becoming suspicious of everybody. Better that than dead, or captured by 13 of them, and hastily she stopped that line of thought. She did not want it in her head. Shiriam, what did happen tonight? She asked. And don't put me off. Shiriam's eyebrows rose almost to her scalp, it seemed, and she hastily amended her question. Shiriam Sedai, I mean. Forgive me, Shiriam Sedai. Remember, you aren't Aes Sedai yet, child. Despite the steel in her voice, a smile touched Shiriam's lips, yet it vanished as she went on. I do not know what happened, except that I very much fear you almost died. Who knows what happens to those who do not come out of a Turang Rial? Alana said as she joined them. The Green Sister was known for her temper and her sense of humor, and some said she could flash from one to the other and back again before you could blink. But the look she gave Egwene was almost diffident. Child, I should have stopped this when I had the chance, when I first noticed that reverberation. It came back. That is what happened. It came back 1,000-fold. 10,000. The ter'angreal almost seemed to be trying to shut off the flow from Saidar, or melt itself through the floor. You have my apologies, though words are not enough. Not for what almost happened to you. I say this, and by the first oath you know it is true. To show my feelings, I will ask the mother to let me share your time in the kitchens. And yes, your visit to Shiriam, too. Had I done as I should, you would not have been in danger of your life, and I will atone for it. Shiriam's laugh was scandalized. She will never allow that, Alana. A sister in the kitchens, much less. It is unheard of. It's impossible. You did what you believed right. There is no fault to you. It was not your fault, Alana Sedai, Egwene said. Why is Alana doing this? Unless maybe to convince me she didn't have anything to do with whatever went wrong. And maybe so she can keep an eye on me all the time. It was that image, a proud Aes Sedai up to her elbows in greasy pots 3 times a day just to watch someone, that convinced her she was letting her imagination run away with her. But it was also unthinkable that Alana should do as she said she would. In any case, the Green sisters certainly had had no chance to see the list of names while tending the ter'angreal. But if Nynaeve is right, she wouldn't need to see those names to want to kill me if she is Black Ajah. Stop that. Really, it wasn't. Had I done as I should, Alana maintained, it would never have happened. The only time I have ever seen anything like it was once years ago when we tried to use a ter'angreal in the same room with another that may have been in some way related to it. It is extremely rare to find 2 such as that. The pair of them melted, and every sister within 100 paces had such a headache for a week that she couldn't channel a spark. What's the matter, child? Egwene's hand had tightened around her pouch till the twisted stone ring impressed itself on her palm through the thick cloth. Was it warm? Light. I did it myself. Nothing, Alana Sedai. Aes Sedai, you did nothing wrong. You have no reason to share my punishments. None at all. None. A bit vehement, Shiriam observed. But true. Alana only shook her head. Aes Sedai, Egwene said slowly. What does it mean to be Green Ajah? Shiriam's eyes opened wider with amusement, and Alana grinned openly. Just with the ring on your finger, the Green sister said, and already trying to decide which Ajah to choose? First, you must love men. I don't mean be in love with them, but love them. Not like a blue, who merely likes men so long as they share her causes and do not get in her way, and certainly not like a red, who despises them as if every one of them were responsible for the breaking. Alviarin, the white sister who had come with the Amerlin, gave them a cool look and moved on. And not like a white, Alana said with a laugh, who has no room in her life for any passions at all. That was not what I meant, Alana said. I want to know what it means to be a Green sister. She was not sure Alana would understand because she was not certain she herself understood what she wanted to know, but Alana nodded slowly as if she did. Browns seek knowledge, blues meddling causes, and whites consider the questions of truth with implacable logic. We all do some of it all, of course. But to be a Green means to stand ready. A note of pride entered Alana's voice. In the Trolloc Wars, we were often called the Battle Ajah. All Aes Sedai helped where and when they could, but the Green Ajah alone was always with the armies in almost every battle. We were the counter to the Dreadlords, the Battle Ajah. And now we stand ready for the Trollocs to come south again, for Tarwan Gaiden, the last battle. We will be there. That is what it means to be a Green. Thank you, Aes Sedai, Egwene said. That is what I was? Or what I will be? Light, I wish I knew if it was real, if it had anything at all to do with here and now. The Amerlin joined them, and they swept deep curtsies to her. Are you well, daughter? She asked Egwene. Her eyes flicked to the corner of the papers sticking out from under the novice dress in Egwene's hands, then back to Egwene's face immediately. I will know the why of what occurred tonight before I am done. Egwene's cheeks reddened. I am well, Mother. Alana surprised her by asking the Amerlin just what she had said she would. I never heard of such a thing, the Amerlin barked. The owner doesn't muck out with the bilge boys, even if he has run the boat on a mudflat. She glanced at Egwene, and worry tightened her eyes, and anger. I share your concern, Alana. Whatever this child has done, it did not deserve that. Very well. If it will assuage your feelings, you may visit Shiriam, but it is to be strictly between you two. I'll not have Aes Sedai held up to ridicule, even inside the tower. Egwene opened her mouth to confess all and let them take the ring. I don't want the bloody thing, really. But Alana forestalled her. And the other mother? Do not be ridiculous, daughter. The Amerlin was angry and sounded more so by the word. You'd be a laughing stock inside the day, except for those who decided you were mad. And don't think it would not follow you. Tales like that have a way of traveling. You would find stories told of the scullion Aes Sedai from Tyr to Maradon, and that would reflect on every sister. No. If you need to rid yourself of some feeling of guilt and cannot handle it as a grown woman would, very well. I have told you that you may visit Shiriam. Accompany her tonight when you leave here. That will give you the rest of the night to decide if it was of any help. And tomorrow you can start finding out what went wrong here tonight. Yes, Mother. Alana's voice was perfectly neutral. The desire to confess had died in Egwene. Alana had shown only one brief flash of disappointment when she realized the Amerlin would not allow her to join Egwene in the kitchens. She doesn't want to be punished any more than any sensible person does. She did want an excuse to be in my company. Light. She couldn't have deliberately caused the Terangrial to go wild. I did that. Can she be Black Aja? Wrapped in thought, Egwene heard her throat cleared. Then again, more roughly. Her eyes focused. The Amerlin was staring right into her, and when she spoke, she bit off each word. Since you seem to be asleep, standing up, child, I suggest you go to bed. For one instant, her glance flashed to the nearly concealed papers in Egwene's hands. You have much work to do tomorrow and for many days thereafter. Her eyes held Egwene's a moment longer, and then she was striding away before any of them could curtsy. Shiriam rounded on Alana as soon as the Amerlin was out of earshot. The green Aes Sedai glowered and took it in silence. You are mad, Alana. A fool, and doubly a fool, if you think I will go lightly on you just because we were novices together. Are you taken by the dragon to... Suddenly, Shiriam became aware of Egwene, and the target of her anger shifted. Did I not hear the Amerlin seat order you to your bed accepted? If you breathe a word of this, you will wish I had buried you in a field to manure the ground, and I will see you in my study in the morning when the bell rings first and not one breath later. Now go! Egwene went, her head spinning. Is there anybody I can trust? The Amerlin? She sent us off chasing 13 of the Black Aja, and forgot to mention that 13 is just the number needed to turn a woman who can channel to the shadow against her will. Who can I trust? She did not want to be alone, could not stand the thought of it, and so she hurried to the Accepted's quarters, thinking that tomorrow she would be moving there herself, and immediately after knocking, pushed open Nynaeve's door. She could trust her with anything, her and Elaine. But Nynaeve was seated in one of the two chairs, with Elaine's head buried in her lap. Elaine's shoulders shook to the sound of weeping, the softer weeping that comes after no energy is left for deeper sobs, but the emotion still burns. Dampness shone on Nynaeve's cheeks, too. The great serpent gleaming on her hand, smoothing Elaine's hair, matched the ring on the hand Elaine used to clutch at Nynaeve's skirt. Elaine lifted a face red and swollen from long crying, sniffing through her sobs when she saw Egwene. I could not be that awful Egwene. I just couldn't. The accident with the Terangrial, Egwene's fear that someone might have read the papers Beren had given her, her suspicions of everyone in that chamber, all these had been terrible, but they had buffered her in a rough, ungentle way from what had happened inside the Terangrial. They had come from the outside, the other was inside. Elaine's words stripped the buffer away, and what was inside hit Egwene as if the ceiling had collapsed. Rand, her husband, and Joya, her baby, Rand pinned and begging her to kill him, Rand chained to be gentled. Before she was aware of moving, she was on her knees beside Elaine, all the tears that should have fallen earlier coming out in a flood. "I couldn't help him, Nynaeve," she sobbed. "I just left him there." Nynaeve flinched as if struck, but the next moment her arms were around both Egwene and Elaine, hugging them, rocking them. "Hush," she crooned softly. "It eases with time. It eases a little. One day we will make them pay our price. Hush, hush."
Chapter 24. Scouting and Discoveries. Sunlight through the carved shutters, creeping across the bed, woke Matt. For a moment, he only lay there frowning. He had not reasoned out any plan for escaping from Tar Valon before sleep had overtaken him, but neither had he given up. Too much memory still lay covered with fog, but he would not give up. 2 serving women came bustling with hot water and a tray heavy with food, laughing and telling him how much better he looked already, and how soon he would be back on his feet if he did what the Aes Sedai told him. He answered them curtly, trying not to sound bitter. "Let them think I mean to go along." His stomach rumbled at the smells from the tray. When they left, he tossed aside his blanket and hopped out of bed, pausing only to stuff half a slice of ham into his mouth before pouring out water to wash and shave. Staring into the mirror above the washstand, he paused in lathering his face. He did look better. His cheeks were still hollow, but not quite as hollow as they had been. The dark circles had vanished from under his eyes, which no longer seemed set so deep in his head. It was as if every bite he had eaten the night before had gone into putting meat on his bones. He even felt stronger. "At this rate," he muttered, "I will be gone before they know it." But he was still surprised when, after shaving, he sat down and consumed every scrap of ham, turnip, and pear on the tray. He was sure they expected him to climb back into bed once he had eaten, but instead he dressed. Stamping his feet to settle them in his boots, he eyed his spare clothes and decided to leave them for now. "I have to know what I'm doing first. And if I leave them..." He tucked the dice cups into his pouch. With those, he could get all the clothes he needed. Opening the door, he peeked out. More doors, paneled in pale golden wood, lined the wall, with colorful tapestries between, and a runner of blue carpet ran down the white-tiled floor. But there was no one out there, no guard. He tossed his cloak over one shoulder and hurried out. Now to find a way outside. It took some little wandering, downstairs into long corridors and across open courts, before he found what he wanted. A doorway to the outside, and he saw people before then. Serving women and white-clad novices hurrying about their chores, the novices running even harder than the servants. A handful of roughly dressed male servants carrying large chests and other heavy loads. Accepted in their banded dresses, even a few Aes Sedai. The Aes Sedai did not seem to notice him as they strode along, intent on whatever purpose, or else they gave him no more than a passing glance. His were country clothes, but well made. He did not look a vagabond, and the serving men showed that men were allowed in this part of the tower. He suspected they might take him for another servant, and that was just as well with him, so long as no one asked him to lift anything. He did feel some regret that none of the women he saw was Egwene or Nynaeve, or even Elaine. She's a pretty one, even if she does have her nose in the air half the time, and she could tell me how to find Egwene and the wisdom. I cannot go without saying goodbye. Light, I don't suppose one of them would turn me in, just because they're becoming Aes Sedai themselves. Burn me for a fool. They'd never do that. Anyway, I will risk it. But once out of doors, under a bright morning sky with only a few drifting white clouds, he put the women from his mind for the time. He was looking across a wide flagstoned yard with a plain stone fountain in the middle, and a barracks on the other side that was made of gray stone. It looked almost like a huge boulder among the few trees growing out of rimmed holes in the flagstones close by. Guardsmen in their shirt sleeves sat in front of the long, low building, tending weapons and armor and harness. Guardsmen were what he wanted now. He sauntered across the yard and watched the soldiers as if he had nothing better to do. As they worked, they talked and laughed among themselves, like men after the harvest. Now and again, one of them looked curiously at Matt as he strolled among them, but none challenged his right to be there. From time to time, he asked a casual question, and finally he got the answer he sought. "Bridge guard," said a stocky, dark-haired man, no more than 5 years older than Matt. His words had a heavy Illinois accent. Young he might have been, but a thin white scar crossed his left cheek, and the hands oiling his sword moved with familiarity and confidence. He squinted up at Matt before returning to his task. "I do be a bridge guard, and back there again this even. Why do you ask?" "I was just wondering what conditions were like on the other side of the river. I might as well find that out, too." "Good for traveling? It can't be muddy, unless you have had more rain than I know about." "Which side of the river?" the guardsman asked placidly. His eyes did not lift from the oiled rag he was running along his blade. East. The east side." "No mud? White folks." The man leaned to one side to spit, but his voice did not change. "White cloaks do be poking their noses into every village for 10 miles. They have not hurt anyone yet, but them just being there do upset the folk. Fortune prick me if I do not think they wish to provoke us, for they do look as if they would attack if they could. No good for anyone who do want to travel." "What about west, then?" "The same." The guardsman raised his eyes to Matt's. "But you will no be crossing, lad, east or west. Your name do be met from Cawthon, or fortune abandoned me. Last night a sister herself in person did come to the bridge where I did stand guard. She did drill your features at us till each could speak them back to her. I guessed, she did say, and no to be harmed, but no to be allowed out of the city either, if you must be tied hand and foot to keep you from it." His eyes narrowed. "Is it that you did steal something from them?" he asked doubtfully. "You do not have the look of those the sisters do guessed." "I didn't steal anything," Matt said indignantly. "Burn me. I didn't even get a chance to work around to it easy. They must all know me. I'm no thief." "No, it is no that I do see in your face. No thievery. But you do have the look of the fellow who did try to sell me the Horn of Valir 3 days gone. So he did claim it did be, all bent and battered as it did be. Do you have a Horn of Valir to sell? Or mayhap, do it be the dragon's sword?" Matt gave a jump at the mention of the horn, but he managed to keep his voice level. "I was sick." Others of the guardsmen were looking at him now. "Like, they'll all know I'm not supposed to leave now." He forced a laugh. "The sisters healed me." Some of the guardsmen frowned at him. Perhaps they thought other men should show more respect than to call the Aes Sedai sisters. "I guess the Aes Sedai don't want me to go before I have all my strength back." He tried willing the men, all of those watching him now, to accept that. Just a man who was healed, nothing more. No reason to trouble yourself about him any further. Yana nodded. "You do have the look of sickness in your face, too. Perhaps that do be the reason. But never did I hear of so much effort to keep one sick man in the city." "That's the reason," Matt said firmly. They were all still looking at him. "Well, I need to be going. They said I have to take walks. Lots of long walks. To build up strength, you know." He felt their eyes following him as he left, and he scowled. He had simply meant to find out how well his description had been passed around. If only the officers among the bridge guards had had it, he might have been able to slip by. He'd always been good at slipping into places unseen. And out. It was a talent you developed when your mother always suspected you were up to some mischief, and you had 4 sisters to tell on you. And now I've made sure half a barracks full of guardsmen will know me. Blood and bloody ashes. Much of the tower grounds were gardens full of trees, leatherleaf and paper bark and elms, and he soon found himself walking along a wide, twisting, graveled path. He could have led through countryside if not for the towers visible over the treetops. and the white bulk of the tower itself behind him, but pressing on him as if he carried it on his shoulders. If there were ways out of the tower grounds that were not watched, this seemed the place to find them. A girl in novice white appeared ahead on the path, striding purposefully toward him. Wrapped in her own thoughts, she did not see him at first. When she came close enough for him to make out her big dark eyes and the way her hair was braided, he grinned suddenly. He knew this girl, memory drifting up from shrouded depths, though he would never have expected to find her here. He had never expected to see her again at all. He grinned to himself. Good luck to balance bad. As he remembered, she had quite an eye for the boys. Els, he called to her. Els Grinwell. You remember me, don't you? Matt Cawthon. A friend and I visited your father's farm. Remember? Have you decided to become Aes Sedai then? She stopped short, staring at him. What are you doing up and out? She said coldly. You know about that, do you? He moved closer to her, but she stepped back, keeping her distance. He stopped. It's not catching. I was healed, Els. Those large, dark eyes seemed more knowing than he remembered, and not nearly so warm, but he supposed studying to be an Aes Sedai could do that. What's the matter, Els? You look like you don't know me. I know you, she said. Her manner was not as he remembered either. He thought she could give Elaine lessons now. I have work to be about. Let me by. He grimaced. The passage persists to walk abreast without crowding. I told you it isn't catching. Let me by. Muttering to himself, he stepped to one edge of the gravel. She went past him, along the other side, watching to make sure he did not come closer. Once by, she took a few steps, glancing over her shoulder at him until she was out of sight around a bend. Wanted to make sure I didn't follow her, he thought sourly. First the guardsman, and now Els. My luck is not in today. He started off again and soon heard a ferocious clatter from one side ahead, like dozens of sticks being beat together. Curious, he turned off toward it into the trees. A little way brought him to a large expanse of bare ground, the earth beaten hard, at least 50 paces across, and nearly 20 At intervals around it, under the trees, stood wooden stands holding quarterstaffs, and practice swords made of strips of wood bound loosely together, and a few real swords and axes and spears. Spaced across the open ground, pairs of men, most stripped to the waist, flailed at each other with more practice swords. Some moved so smoothly it almost seemed they danced with one another, flowing from stance to stance, stroke to counterstroke in continuous motion. There was nothing quickly apparent aside from skill from the others. They were curious watching warders. Those who did not move so smoothly were all younger, each pair under the watchful eyes of an older man who seemed to radiate a dangerous grace even standing still. Warders and students, Matt decided. He was not the only audience. Not 10 paces from him, half a dozen women with ageless Aes Sedai faces and as many more in the banded white dresses of the accepted stood watching one pair of students, bare to the waist and slick with sweat, under the guidance of a warder shaped much like a block of stone. The warder used a short-stemmed pipe in one hand, trailing tobacco smoke, to direct his pupils. Sitting down cross-legged under a leather leaf, Matt rooted 3 large pebbles out of the ground and began to juggle them idly. He did not feel weak exactly, but it was good to sit. If there was a way out of the tower grounds, it would not go away while he took a short rest. Before he had been there 5 minutes, he knew who it was the Aes Sedai and accepted were watching. One of the blocky warder's pupils was a tall, lithe young man who moved like a cat. And almost as pretty as a girl, Matt thought wryly. Every woman was staring at the tall fellow with sparkling eyes, even the Aes Sedai. The tall man handled his practice sword almost as deftly as the warder's, now and then earning an approving, gravelly comment from his teacher. It was not that his opponent, a youth more Matt's age with red gold hair, was unskilled. Far from it, as much as Matt could see, though he had never claimed to know anything about swords. The golden-haired man met every lightning attack, turning it away before the bound strips could strike him, and even launched an occasional attack of his own. But the handsome fellow countered those attacks and flowed back into his zone in the space of a heartbeat. Matt shifted the pebbles to one hand, but kept them spinning in the air. He did not think he would care to face either of them, certainly not with a sword. "Break!" The warder's voice sounded like rocks emptying out of a bucket. Chests heaved. The two men let their practice swords fall to their sides. Sweat matted their hair. "You can rest till I finish my pipe, but rest fast. I'm almost in the dottle." Now that they had stopped dancing about, Matt got a good look at the youth with the red gold hair and let the pebbles drop. "Burn me. I'll bet my whole purse that's Elaine's brother. And the other one's Galad, or I'll eat my boots." On the journey from Toman Head, it had seemed half of Elaine's conversation had been of Gawain's virtues and Galad's vices. Well, Gawain had some vices, according to Elaine, but they were small. To Matt, they sounded like the sort of things no one but a sister would consider vices at all. As for Galad, once Elaine was pinned down, he sounded like what every mother said she wanted her son to be. Matt did not think he wanted to spend much time in Galad's company. Egwene blushed whenever Galad was mentioned, though she seemed to think no one noticed. A ripple seemed to pass through the watching women when Gawain and Galad stopped, and they appeared on the point of stepping forward almost as one. But Gawain caught sight of Matt, said something quietly to Galad, and the two of them walked by the women. The Aes Sedai and Accepted turned to follow with their eyes. Matt scrambled to his feet as the pair approached. "You are Matt Cawthon, are you not?" Gawain said with a grin. "I was sure I recognized you from Egwene's description, and Elaine's. I understand you are sick. Are you better now?" "I'm fine," Matt said. He wondered if he was supposed to call Gawain my lord, or something of the sort. He had refused to call Elaine my lady, not that she had demanded it actually, and he decided he would not do her brother better. "Did you come to the practice yard to learn the sword?" Galad asked. Matt shook his head. "I was only out walking. I don't know much about swords. I think I'll put my trust in a good bow or a good quarterstaff. I know how to use those." "If you spend much time around Nynaeve," Galad said, "you'll need bow, quarterstaff, and sword to protect yourself. And I don't know whether that would be enough." Gawain looked at him wonderingly. "Galad, you just very nearly made a joke." "I do have a sense of humor, Gawain," Galad said with a frown. "You only think I do not because I do not care to mock people." With a shake of his head, Gawain turned back to Matt. "You should learn something of the sword. Everyone can do with that sort of knowledge these days. Your friend, Randolph Thor, carried a most unusual sword. What do you hear of him?" "I haven't seen Rand in a long time," Matt said quickly. Just for a moment, when he had mentioned Rand, Gawain's look had gained intensity. Light, does he know about Rand? He couldn't. If he did, he'd be denouncing me for a dark friend just for being Rand's friend. But he knows something. Swords aren't the be-all and end-all, you know. I could do fairly well against either of you, I think, if you had a sword and I had my quarterstaff. Gawain's cough was obviously meant to swallow a laugh. Much too politely, he said, "You must be very good." Galad's face was frankly disbelieving. Perhaps it was that they both clearly thought he was making a wild boast. Perhaps it was because he had mishandled questioning the guardsman. Perhaps it was because Els, who had such an eye for the boys, wanted nothing to do with him, and all those women were staring at Galad like cats watching a jug of cream. Aes Sedai and Accepted or not, they were still women. All these explanations ran through Matt's head, but he rejected them angrily, especially the last. He was going to do it because it would be fun, and it might earn some coin. His luck would not even have to be back. "I will wager," he said, 2 silver marks to 2 from each of you that I can beat both of you at once, just the way I said. You can't have fairer odds than that. There are 2 of you and 1 of me, so 2 to 1 are fair odds." He almost laughed aloud at the consternation on their faces. "Matt," Gawain said, "there's no need to make wagers. You have been sick. Perhaps we will try this some time when you are stronger." "It would be far from a fair wager," Galad said. "I'll not take your wager now or later." You are from the same village as Egwene, are you not? I would not have her angry with me. What does she have to do with it? Thump me once with one of your swords, and I will hand over a silver mark to each of you. If I thump you till you quit, you will give me 2 each. Don't you think you can do it? This is ridiculous, Galad said. You would have no chance against 1 trained swordsman, let alone 2. I'll not take such advantage. Do you think that? Asked a gravel voice. The blocky warder joined them, thick black eyebrows pulled down in a scowl. You think you 2 are good enough with your swords to take a boy with a stick? It would not be fair, Hamar Gaidin, Galad said. He has been sick, Gawain added. There is no need for this. To the yard, Hamar grated, with a jerk of his head back over his shoulder. Galad and Gawain gave Matt regretful looks, then obeyed. The warder eyed Matt up and down doubtfully. Are you sure you're up to this, lad? Now I take a close look at you, you ought to be in a sick bed. I'm already out of one, Matt said, and I'm up to it. I have to be. I don't want to lose my 2 marks. Amar's heavy brows rose in surprise. You mean to hold to that wager, lad? I need the money, Matt laughed. His laughter cut off abruptly as he turned toward the nearest stand that held quarterstaffs, and his knees almost buckled. He stiffened them so quickly he thought anyone who noticed would think he had just stumbled. At the stand, he took his time choosing out a staff, nearly 2 inches thick and almost a foot taller than he was. I have to win this. I opened my fool mouth, and now I have to win. I can't afford to lose those 2 marks. Without those to build on, it will take forever to win the money I need. When he turned back, the quarterstaff in both hands before him, Gawain and Galad were already waiting out where they had been practicing. I have to win. Luck, he muttered. Time to toss the dice. Amar gave him an odd look. You speak the old tongue, lad. Matt stared back at him for a moment, not speaking. He felt cold to the stone. With an effort, he made his feet start out onto the practice yard. Remember the wager, he said loudly. 2 silver marks from each of you against 2 from me. A buzz rose from the accepted as they realized what was happening. The Aes Sedai watched in silence, disapproving silence. Gawain and Galad split apart, one to either side of him, keeping their distance, neither with his sword more than half raised. No wager, Gawain said. There's no wager. At the same time, Galad said, I'll not take your money like this. I mean to take yours, Matt said. Done, Amar roared. If they have not the nerve to cover your wager, lad, I'll pay the score myself. Very well, Gawain said. If you insist on it, done. Galad hesitated a moment more before growling, Done, then. Let us put an end to this farce. The moment's warning was all Matt needed. As Galad rushed at him, he slid his hands along the quarterstaff and pivoted. The end of the staff thudded into the tall man's ribs, bringing a grunt and a stumble. Matt let the staff bounce off Galad and spun, carrying it around just as Gawain came within range. The staff dipped, darted under Gawain's practice sword, and clipped his ankle out from under him. As Gawain fell, Matt completed the spin in time to catch Galad across his upraised wrist, sending his practice sword flying. As if his wrist did not pain him at all, Galad threw himself into a smooth, rolling dive and came up with his sword in both hands. Ignoring him for the moment, Matt half-turned, twisting his wrists to whip the length of the staff back beside him. Gawain, just starting to rise, took the blow on the side of the head with a loud thump, only partly softened by the patting of hair. He went down in a heap. Matt was only vaguely aware of an Aes Sedai rushing out to tend Elaine's fallen brother. I hope he's all right. He should be. I've hit myself harder than that, falling off a fence. He still had Galad to deal with, and from the way Galad was poised in the balls of his feet, sword raised precisely, he had begun to take Matt seriously. Matt's legs chose that moment to tremble. Light, I can't weaken now. But he could feel it creeping back in, the wobbly feeling, the hunger as if he had not eaten for days. If I wait for him to come to me, I'll fall on my face. It was hard to keep his knees straight as he started forward. Luck, stay with me. From the first blow, he knew that luck or skill or whatever had brought him this far was still there. Gilad managed to turn that one with a sharp clack, and the next, and the next, and the next, but strain stiffened his face. That smooth swordsman, almost as good as the warders, fought with every ounce of his skill to keep Matt's staff from him. He did not attack. It was all he could do to defend. He moved continually to the side, trying not to be forced back, and Matt pressed him, staff a blur. And Gilad stepped back again, wooden blade a thin shield against the quarterstaff. Hunger gnawed at Matt as if he had swallowed weasels. Sweat rolled down into his eyes, and his strength began to fade as if it leached out with the sweat. Not yet. I can't fall yet. I have to win. Now. With a roar, he threw all his reserves into one last surge. The quarterstaff flickered past Gilad's sword and in quick succession struck knee, wrist, and ribs, and finally thrust into Gilad's stomach like a spear. With a groan, Gilad folded over, fighting not to fall. The staff quivered in Matt's hands, on the point of a final crushing thrust to the throat. Gilad sank to the ground. Matt almost dropped the quarterstaff when he realized what he had been about to do. Win, not kill. Like, what was I thinking? Reflexively, he grounded the butt of the staff, and as soon as he did, he had to clutch at it to hold himself erect. Hunger hollowed him like a knife reaming marrow from a bone. Suddenly he realized that not only the Aes Sedai and Accepted were watching. All practice, all learning had stopped. Warders and students alike stood watching him. Amar moved to stand beside Gilad, still groaning on the ground and trying to push himself up. The warder raised his voice to shout, "Who is the greatest blade master of all time?" From the throats of dozens of students came a massed bellow. "Jerome, Gaidin." "Yes," Amar shouted, turning to make sure all heard. "During his lifetime, Jerome fought over 10,000 times in battle and single combat. He was defeated once by a farmer with a quarterstaff. Remember that. Remember what you just saw." He lowered his eyes to Gilad and lowered his voice as well. "If you cannot get up by now, lad, it is finished." He raised a hand, and the Aes Sedai and Accepted rushed to surround Gilad. Matt slid down the staff to his knees. None of the Aes Sedai even glanced his way. One of the Accepted did, a plump girl he might have liked to ask for a dance if she were not going to be an Aes Sedai. She frowned at him, sniffed, and turned back to peering at what the Aes Sedai were doing around Gilad. Gowan was on his feet, Matt noted with relief. He pulled himself up as Gowan came over. "Mustn't let them know. I'll never get out of here if they decide to nurse me from sunup to sunup." Blood darkened the red-gold hair on the side of Gowan's head, but there was neither cut nor bruise apparent. He pushed 2 silver marks into Matt's hand with a dry, "I think I will listen next time." He noticed Matt's glance, touched his head. "They healed it, but it was not bad. Elaine has given me worse more than once. You are good with that." "Not as good as my Da. He's won the quarterstaff at Beltane every year as long as I can remember, except once or twice when Ransda did." That interested look came back into Gowan's eyes, and Matt wished he had never mentioned Tam Althor. The Aes Sedai and the Accepted were all still clustered around Gilad. I must have hurt him badly. I did not mean to do that." Gowan glanced that way. There was nothing to be seen but 2 rings of women's backs, Accepted's white dresses making the outer ring as they peered over the shoulders of crouching Aes Sedai, and laughed. "You did not kill him. I heard him groaning. So he should be on his feet by now, but they are not going to let this chance pass. Now they have their hands on him. Light, 4 of them are green Aja." Matt gave him a confused look. "Green Aja? What does that have to do with anything?" And Gowan shook his head. "It doesn't matter. Just rest assured that the worst Gilad has to worry about is finding himself warder to a green Aes Sedai before his head clears." He laughed. "No, they would not do that. But I will wager you those 2 marks of mine in your hand that some of them wish they could." "Not your marks," Matt said, shoving them in his coat pocket. "Mine." The explanation had made little sense to him. except that Galad was well. All he knew of what passed between Waters and Aes Sedai were the pieces he remembered of Lan and Moraine. And there was nothing like what Gowan seemed to be suggesting. Do you think they'd mind if I collected my wager from him? They very likely would, Amar said dryly as he joined them. You are not very popular with those particular Aes Sedai right now. He snorted. You'd think even green Aes Sedai would be better than girls just loose from their mother's apron strings. He isn't that good looking. He is not, Matt agreed. Gowan grinned at both of them until Hummer glared at him. Here, the warder said, pushing 2 more silver coins into Matt's hand. I will collect from Galad later. Where are you from, lad? Manetheren. Matt froze when he heard the name come out of his mouth. I mean, I'm from the 2 Rivers. I've heard too many old stories. They just looked at him without saying anything. I think I will go back and see if I can find something to eat. Not even the mid-morning bell had rung yet, but they nodded as if it made sense. He kept the quarterstaff, no one had told him to put it back, and walked slowly until the trees hid him from the practice yard. When they did, he leaned on the staff as though it were the only thing holding him up. He was not sure it was not. He thought that if he parted his coat, he could see a hole where his stomach should have been, a hole growing larger as it pulled the rest of him in. But he hardly thought of hunger. He kept hearing voices in his head. You speak the old tongue, lad? Manetheren. It made him shiver. Light, help me. I keep digging myself deeper. I have to get out of here, but how? He hobbled back toward the tower proper like an old man. How?
Chapter 25. Questions. Egwene lay across Nynaeve's bed, chin in her hands, watching Nynaeve pace back and forth. Elaine sprawled in front of the fireplace, which was still full of the ashes of last night's fire. Yet again, Elaine was studying the list of names Baron had produced, patiently reading every word one more time. The other pages, the list of ter'angreal, sat on the table. After one shocked reading, they had not discussed that one further, though they had talked of everything else, and argued, too. Egwene stifled a yawn. It was only the middle of the morning, but none of them had gotten much sleep. They had had to be up early, for the kitchens and breakfast, for other things that she refused to think about. The little sleep she herself had managed had been filled with unpleasant dreams. Maybe Anaya could help me understand them, those that need understanding, but what if she is Black Aja? After staring at every woman in that chamber last night, wondering which was Black Aja, she was finding trust for anyone but her 2 companions hard to come by. But she did wish she had some way of interpreting those dreams. The nightmares about what had happened inside the ter'angreal last night were easy enough to understand, though they had made her wake up weeping. She had dreamed of the Shan-Chan, too, of women in dresses with lightning bolts woven on their breasts, collaring a long line of women who wore great serpent wings, forcing them to call lightning against the White Tower. That had started her awake in a cold sweat, but that had to be just a nightmare, too. And the dream about white cloaks binding her father's hands. A nightmare brought on by homesickness, she supposed. But the others. She glanced at the other 2 women again. Elaine was still reading. Nynaeve still paced with that steady tread. There had been a dream of Rand, reaching for a sword that seemed to be made of crystal, never seeing the fine net dropping over him, and one of him kneeling in a chamber where a parched wind blew dust across the floor, and creatures like the one on the dragon banner, but much smaller, floated on that wind and settled into his skin. There had been a dream of him walking down into a great hole in a black mountain, a hole filled with a reddish glare, as from vast fires below, and even a dream of him confronting Shan-Chan. About that last she was uncertain, but she knew the others had to mean something. Back when she had been sure she could trust Anaya, back before she had left the tower, before she learned the reality of the Black Aja, a little cautious questioning of the Aes Sedai, done oh so carefully, so Anaya would think it no more than the curiosity she showed about other things, had revealed that a dreamer's dreams about Taviran were almost always significant, and the more strongly Taviran, the more almost always became certainly. But Matt and Perrin were Taviran too, and she'd also dreamed of them. Odd dreams, even more difficult to understand than the dreams of Rand. Matt with a falcon on his shoulder and Perrin with a hawk. Only the hawk held a leash in her talons. Egwene was somehow convinced both hawk and falcon were female, and the hawk was trying to fasten it around Perrin's neck. That made her shiver even now. She did not like dreams about leashes. And that dream of Perrin with a beard, leading a huge pack of wolves that stretched as far as the eye could see. Those about Matt had been even nastier. Matt placing his own left eye on a balance scale. Matt hanging by his neck from a tree limb. There had been a dream of Matt and Sean-Chan too, but she was willing to dismiss that as a nightmare. It had to have been just a nightmare. Just like the one about Matt speaking the old tongue. That had to come from what she had heard during his healing. She sighed, and the sigh turned into another yawn. She and the others had gone to his room after breakfast to see how he was, but he had not been there. He is probably well enough to go dancing. Light. Now I will probably dream about him dancing with Sean-Chan. No more dreams, she told herself firmly. Not now. I will think about them when I am not so tired. She thought of the kitchens, of the midday meal soon to come, and then supper, and breakfast again tomorrow, and pots and cleaning and scrubbing going on forever. If I am ever not tired again. Shifting her position on the bed, she looked at her friends again. Elaine still had her eyes on the list of names. Nynaeve's steps had slowed. Any moment now, Nynaeve will say it again. Any moment. Nynaeve came to a halt, staring down at Elaine. Put those away. We've been...
Salut à tous.
Hey, we've been over them 20 times and there isn't a word that helps. Varen gave us rubbish. The question is, was it all she had, or did she give us rubbish on purpose? As expected. Maybe half an hour till she says it again. Egwene frowned down at her hands, glad she could not see them clearly. The great serpent ring looked out of place on hands all wrinkled from long immersion in hot soapy water. Knowing their names helps, Elaine said, still reading. Knowing what they look like helps. You know very well what I mean, Nynaeve snapped. Egwene sighed and folded her arms in front of her, rested her chin on them. When she had come out of Shiriam's study that morning with the sun still not even a glint on the horizon, Nynaeve had been waiting with a candle in the cold, dark hall. She had not been seeing very clearly, but she was sure Nynaeve was ready to chew stone, and knowing chewing stones would not change anything in the next few minutes. That was why she was so irritable. She's as touchy about her pride as any man I ever met. But she should not take it out on Elaine and me. Light. If Elaine can stand it, she should be able to. She isn't the wisdom anymore. Elaine hardly appeared to notice whether Nynaeve was irritable or not. She frowned into the distance thoughtfully. Leandrin was the only red. All the other Ajahs lost 2 each. Oh, do be quiet, child, Nynaeve said. Elaine wiggled her left hand to display her great serpent ring, gave Nynaeve a meaningful look, and went right on. No 2 were born in the same city, and no more than 2 in any one country. Amiko Nagoyen was the youngest, only 4 years older than Egwene and I. Joya Bier could be our grandmother. Egwene did not like it that one of the Black Ajah shared her daughter's name. Fool girl. People sometimes have the same name, and you've never had a daughter. It wasn't real. And what does that tell us? Nynaeve's voice was too calm. She was ready to explode like a wagon full of fireworks. What secrets have you found in it that I missed? I'm getting old and blind after all. It tells us it is all too neat, Elaine said calmly. What chance that 13 women chosen solely because they were dark friends would be so neatly arrayed across age, across nations, across Ajahs? Shouldn't there be perhaps 3 reds, or 4 born in Kyrian, or just 2 the same age if it was all chance? They had women to choose from, or they could not have chosen so random a pattern. There are still black Aya in the tower, or elsewhere we don't know about. It must mean that. Nynaeve gave her braid one ferocious tug. Light, I think you may be right. You did find secrets I couldn't. Light, I was hoping they all went with Leandrin. We do not even know that she is their leader, Elaine said. She could have been ordered to dispose of us. Her mouth twisted. I am afraid I can only think of one reason for them to go to such lengths to spread everything else so, to avoid any pattern except a lack of pattern. I think it means there is a pattern of some kind to the Black Ajah. If there's a pattern, Nynaeve said firmly, we will find it. Elaine, if watching your mother run her court taught you to think like this, I'm glad you watched closely. Elaine's answering smile made a dimple in her cheek. Egwene eyed the older woman carefully. It seemed Nynaeve was finally ready to stop being a bear with a sore tooth. She raised her head. Unless they want us to think they're hiding a pattern, so we will waste our time hunting for it when there isn't one. I'm not saying there isn't. I'm only saying we do not know yet. Let's look for it, but I think we ought to look at other things too, don't you? So you finally decided to rouse, Nynaeve said. I thought you were going to sleep, but she was still scared. She is right, Elaine said disgustedly. I built a bridge out of straw. What kind of straw? Wishes. Maybe you are right too, Nynaeve. What use is this rubbish? She snatched one paper out of the stack in front of her. Rihanna has black hair with a white streak above her left ear. If I'm close enough to see that, it's closer than I want to be. She grabbed another page. Esmal Emery is one of the most talented healers anyone has seen in years. Light, could you imagine being healed by one of the Black Ajah? A third sheet. Marilyn Gamalfin is fond of cats and goes out of her way to help injured animals. Cats. Pah! She scrabbled all the pages together, crumpling them in her fists. It is useless rubbish. Nynaeve knelt beside her and gently pried her hands from around the papers. Perhaps, or perhaps not. She smoothed the pages carefully on her breast. You found in them something for us to look for. Perhaps we will find more if we are persistent. And there is the other list. Both her eyes and Elaine's darted to Egwene, brown and blue alike, frowning worriedly. Egwene avoided looking at the table where the other sheets lay. She did not want to think about them, but she could not avoid it. The list of Terangrial had etched itself into her mind. Item: a rod of clear crystal, smooth and perfectly clear, 1 foot long and 1 inch in diameter, use unknown, last study made by Corianin Nadil. Item: a figurine of an unclothed woman in alabaster, 1 hand tall, use unknown, last study made by Corianin Nadil. Item: a disc, apparently of simple iron yet untouched by rust, 3 inches in diameter, finely engraved on both sides with a tight spiral, use unknown, last study made by Corianin Nadil. Item: too many items, and more than half the use unknowns last studied by Corianin Nadil. 13 of them, to be exact. Egwene shivered. It's getting so I do not even like to think of that number. The knowns on the list were fewer, not all of any apparent real use, but hardly more comforting as she saw it. A wooden carving of a hedgehog, no bigger than the last joint of a man's thumb. Such a simple thing, and surely harmless. Any woman who tried to channel through it went to sleep. Half a day of peaceful, dreamless sleep, but it was too close not to make her skin crawl. 3 more had to do with sleep in some way. It was almost a relief to read of a fluted rod of black stone a full pace in length that produced balefire with the notation, dangerous and almost impossible to control, writ so strong in Baron's hand that it tore the paper in 2 places. Egwene still had no idea what balefire was, but though it surely sounded dangerous if anything ever did, it just as surely had nothing to do with Corianin Nadil or dreams. Nynaeve carried the smoothed-out pages to the table and set them down. She hesitated before spreading the others out and running her finger down one page, then the next. "Here's one Matt would enjoy," she said, in a voice much too light and airy. "Item: a carved cluster of 6 spotted dice, joined at the corners, less than 2 inches across. Use unknown, save that channeling through it seems to suspend chance in some way, or twist it." She began to read aloud. Tossed coins presented the same face every time, and in one test landed balanced on edge 100 times in a row. 1,000 tosses of the dice produced 5 crowns 1,000 times. She gave a forced laugh. Matt would love that. Egwene sighed and got to her feet, walked stiffly to the fireplace. Elaine scrambled up, watching as silently as Nynaeve. Pushing her sleeve as far up her arm as it would go, Egwene reached carefully up the chimney. Her fingers touched wool on the smoke shelf, and she pulled out a wadded, singed stocking with a hard lump in the toe. She brushed a smear of soot from her arm, then took the stocking to the table and shook it out. The twisted ring of striped flecked stones spun across the tabletop and fell flat atop a page of the Terangrial list. For a few moments they just stared at it. "Perhaps," Nynaeve said finally, "Varen simply missed the fact that so many of them were last studied by Corianan." She did not sound as if she really believed it. Elaine nodded, doubtfully. "I saw her walking in the rain once, soaking wet, and took a cloak to her. She was so wrapped up in whatever she was thinking, I do not believe she knew it was raining until I put the cloak around her shoulders. She could have missed it." "Maybe," Egwene said. "If she did not, she had to know I'd notice as soon as I read the list. I do not know. Sometimes I think Varen notices more than she lets on. I just do not know." "So there's Varen to suspect," Elaine sighed. "If she is Black Aja, then they know exactly what we are doing. And Alana." She gave Egwene an uncertain, sidelong look. Egwene had told them everything, except what happened inside the Terangrial during her testing. She could not bring herself to talk about that, any more than Nynaeve or Elaine could tell of their testings. Everything that happened in the testing chamber, what Shiriam had said about the terrible weakness conferred by the ability to channel, every word Varen had said, whether it seemed important or not. The one part they had had trouble accepting was Alana. Aes Sedai just did not do things like that. No one in her right mind did anything like that, but Aes Sedai least of all. Egwene glowered at them, almost hearing them say it. "Aes Sedai are not supposed to lie either, but Varen and the mother seem awfully close with what they tell us. They are not supposed to be Black Aja." "I like Alana." Nynaeve tugged her braid, then shrugged. "Oh, very well. Perhaps, that is, she did behave oddly." "Thank you," Egwene said, and Nynaeve gave her an acknowledging nod as if she had heard no sarcasm. "In any case, the Amerlin knows of it, and she can keep an eye on Alana far more easily than we can." "What about Elida and Shiriam?" "I've never been able to like Elida," Elaine said, "but I cannot truly believe she is Black Aja. And Shiriam? It's impossible." Nynaeve snorted. "It should be impossible for any of them. When we do find them, there is nothing says they'll all be women we do not like. But I don't mean to put suspicion, not this kind of suspicion, on any woman. We need more to go on than that they might have seen something they shouldn't." Egwene nodded agreement as quickly as Elaine, and Nynaeve went on. "We will tell the Amerlin that much and put no more weight to it than it deserves, if she ever looks in on us as she said she would. If you are with us when she comes, Elaine, remember she does not know about you." "I am not likely to forget it," Elaine said fervently. "But we should have some other way to get word to her. My mother would have planned it better." "Not if she could not trust her messengers," Nynaeve said. "We will wait. Unless you two think one of us should have a talk with Varen. No one would think that remarkable." Elaine hesitated, then gave her head a small shake. Egwene was quicker and more vigorous with hers. Slip of the mind or not, Varen had left out too much to be trusted. Good. Nynaeve sounded more than satisfied. I'm just as pleased we cannot talk to the Amerlin when we choose. This way we make our own decisions, act when and as we decide, without her directing our every step. Her hand ran down the pages listing stolen ter'angreal as if she were reading it again, then closed on the striped stone ring. And the first decision concerns this. It's the first thing we have seen that has any real connection to Leandrin and the others. She frowned at the ring, then took a deep breath. I'm going to sleep with it tonight. Egwene did not hesitate before taking the ring out of Nynaeve's hand. She wanted to hesitate. She wanted to keep her hands by her sides, but she did not, and she was pleased. I am the one they say might be a dreamer. I do not know whether that gives me any advantage, but Varen said it's dangerous using this. Whichever of us uses it, she needs any advantage she can find. Nynaeve gripped her braid and opened her mouth as if to protect.
All right, everyone. We gotta call into this live for tonight. But I want to thank everyone for stopping by and everyone who continues to stop by. I definitely appreciate all y'all's support. Until next time, everyone. Y'all stay safe out there.